items. Just as a reminder, this meeting will be web broadcast through the Open Meetings Act, and so you're on TV, probably to an audience of nobody, but you are on TV. We probably will be taking a break from the web broadcast as we go into our lunch period at noontime, and so you can be a little bit more relaxed at that point in time, but don't say anything truly embarrassing. There is coffee and water available on the side table, and so please have some if you are interested. It's a fairly informal setting that we've got, and so please feel free to get up and move around if you need to. If you find that you need to dispatch with coffee and water, there are facilities on the other side of the hall that are available to you. Are there any other informational items that the group needs to know about? You should have had an envelope in front of you to collect your $10 fee if you wish to participate in lunch today. Obviously, as you look at the front of the envelope, if you need change for that payment, just indicate so, and that will be brought to you. I'd like to take a few moments to go around and do introductions, and I was wondering if maybe, David, you could kick that out.
I'm David Roach from Texas Tech University, and I serve there as an Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences.
I'm Nancy Martin, University of Texas at San Antonio, Associate Vice Provost for the Core Curriculum and the QEP.
I'm Chris Ritzie from Sul Ross State University and Chair of the Biology, Geology, and Physical Sciences Department.
Good morning. I'm Barbara Lerner from Texas Women's University, and I serve TWU as the Associate Provost for Undergraduate Studies and Academic Partnerships.
I'm Colleen Smith from Collin College. I'm the District Senior Vice President at Collin College. I think it just means I'm the oldest one.
I'm Reinhold Cornelius, Assistant Director here at the Division of Academic Affairs, Research, and something else.
That's it. Workforce.
WAR. W-A-A-R. Workforce, Academic Affairs, and Research. That's it.
Melinda Valdez. I'm a Program Director under Dr. Cornelius in Workforce, Academic Affairs, and Research.
Good morning, Kristen Croyle from the University of Texas Pan American, where I serve as the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education.
Hello, I'm Larry Abram. I'm the Associate Dean in the School of Undergraduate Studies at the University of Texas at Austin.
Good morning. I'm Juanita Flint. I am the Executive Dean of Health and Human Services at Brookhaven College, part of the Dallas County Community College District.
Van Wigington, Provost for the San Jacinto College Central Campus.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Cottrell. I'm Vice President for Academic Affairs at Texas Lutheran University.
I'm Fred Hills, McLennan Community College. I'm the Dean of Arts and Sciences.
Good morning. I'm Beth Brunk Chavez, and I'm at the University of Texas at El Paso, where I'm an Associate Dean of the College of Liberal Arts.
Good morning. My name is Itzel Figueroa, and I'm the undergraduate student representative, and I'm majoring in accounting, and I'll be graduating this May.
Morning, I'm Steve Zani. I'm Director of Faculty Development at Lamar University in Beaumont.
Good morning, I'm Marnita Gwynn. I'm the Dean of Associate Degree Nursing at Ranger College.
Janet Armitage, St. Mary's University, Associate Professor.
I'm Kathy Wetzel, and I'm Chair of Math Sciences and Engineering at Amarillo College and Assistant Dean of Arts and Sciences.
Any other introductions? Way back in the back? Right. And over here on the side. Yeah. Yes. Okay, thank you. We like BJ because she brings the coffee, or makes certain that we have coffee, makes certain that we have lunch, and really handles a lot of the administrative responsibilities that are affiliated with this meeting. And so, great service. Thank you. I'd also like to take a minute to recognize those individuals who are with us who are scheduled to be rolling off the Ueac here in 2014. They're listed in the membership list that you've got, and I was just wondering if anybody would like to have a few parting words out of that group. Itzla, I'm going to put you on the spot. I understand that you kind of have some updates about what you're going to be doing after your graduation. Would you care to share?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I'll be graduating this May with my Bachelor in Accounting. I have received an offer in Washington, D.C. with a federal agency where I'll be working with their audits department. I have been interning with them for the last 2 summers, and now I'll be joining the team as a full-time employee. As part of my 4 years in the University of Texas at El Paso, I have been serving the University Career Center, where I've been helping different departments with student development and professionalism, such as the College of Health Science, Nursing, and now I'm serving the College of Business. So it's been a great pleasure and honor to be part of the board, being able to represent not only UTEP students, but the whole entire state as well. And the feedback that I've been providing and the feedback that I've been getting from each and every one of you has also been a great impact in what I've done during the last 4 years, especially these 2 years in the committee.
Thank you, and I think I probably speak for everybody in the room that we really wish you the best as you move forward with your new job. Comments from any of our other 2014 term members? Well, if not, there is a copy of the minutes from our prior meeting that's part of your agenda packet. And so if you would pull those out and give them a quick read, and take care of that item of business. What's in here? Are there any suggested changes to the minutes? Dennis moves approval of the minutes. Are there any, let's see, Fred, you second? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, minutes approved. Our next item on the agenda is an update, discussion, and consideration of the 2014 core curriculum and some associated issues. Reinhold, if I recall correctly, you're going to be leading this discussion?
Yes. So, as you all know, from your own experience, we went through the approval of the new Texas Common Core, and all institutions, 88 received approval letters at the end of February or the 1st of March. And we had quite a few issues resulting from the approval, mainly because some courses were not approved, and that caused difficulties for institutions who found themselves with less than 42 semester credit hours in the core and the various combinations of the FCA and CAO. And so we have been working with those institutions since then to get rid of that issue by helping them establishing that one course that is missing. It's typically one course which pretty much everybody has to take, or all science majors have to take because they have overflow hours from the labs. So we have been working with them, and we are near completion with that task. So those institutions where we make corrections to help them out to go forward according to statute and according to their mission, they will receive another information sheet either this week or next week, and then the core is approved. We would like to discuss two issues for the core coming up going forward on a routine basis. And the rules had changed for that from previously, and the major change is that every institution can submit once a change per academic year. And when the submission is done, is up to the institution, and but it can only, from now on, only be done once every academic year. We had in the rules a deadline, and so I would like to talk about that first. So that's on the second page of that redlined printout of the rules. We had a deadline of March 1, and we were thinking about striking that, because it really does not matter to us when you submit it, and we know that you have to work with your timetable for the catalog. So we are thinking of posting on the website an estimated time it will take us to approve a core, while that may also depend how you all submit it. If 88 institutions submit on March 1st for substantial revisions, we won't get done in 30 days. If some submitted earlier, we can deal with that and on a staggered basis. So basically, we are asking your input if that is okay with you to get rid of the March 1 deadline. In conjunction with that, we had a lot of issues which we are also still cleaning up with that the course inventory has an annual tag to it. And typically, or so far, the new course inventory opens sometime in April. So it was too late for the actual academic year course inventory to be used with the core. That did not matter much because institutions could put courses into the current course inventory and that way pull it into their core listing. However, in one instance this doesn't work if an institution changes semester credit hours. If they had courses with 4 semester credit hour and want to switch it to 3 semester credit hour, they can't do that because it messes up the students who currently take that class. So that's one of the things we have to clean up. We have to, after we send the core approval, we have to change that. So I talked to our planning people who run the course inventory, and they are willing to open up the new new course inventory for the next academic year earlier, if that is something institutions would like. We were thinking maybe instead of doing it in April, doing it about February 1st. That way, institutions who really need to change things like semester credit hours could do that in the month of February and still could submit their core changes by March 1st, hopefully in plenty of time for the new catalog. There is a problem with that, as it was explained to me. And that's why right now the new course inventory opens up not before April. In February, many institutions still make changes to their course inventory to deal with their current students. If they do that in the future and we open up the new course inventory earlier, they have to remember that those changes don't automatically get grandfathered into the next course inventory. So they would have to make those changes by hand twice. And so our people upstairs were worried that that might cause confusion or difficulty for institutions. So we have to somehow balance this, our wish to have the course inventory ready for changes in the core in a timely fashion, and the ongoing changes institutions still doing in February. And so maybe there too you can give us advice how to deal with that. I was told when the new course inventory opens up that we send out an email that happened. And that is, of course, then, since we do this, an opportunity to make people aware that the timing has changed and the implications of that. And they may be that people have to remember what they did and do it over again. Or do it twice at the same time, I would think, because they're both open. That's probably the best approach. So that's really the background to this, which has nothing to do with our rules, but which has to do with our procedure. And I would like input from you what to tell our data people how to proceed next year. And I didn't mention that the core updates you will be doing from now on every year will be done with the same application tool, web-based application tool you have been using last year for the new core. It will be rolled over to the new year. Your old core, which is then old, your old new core, will be sitting there, and you just will make changes. And we are thinking to open it up in October. We have to take a little time to do that because we have to go to IT and streamline the application a little bit with things we found don't quite work. So we have to build in that time.
Reinald, it appears that there are 3 questions for discussion. The first is removal of the March 1st deadline for submission of core revisions. The second is how and when to open the course inventory for changes so that the inventory is in place prior to submission of course requests for the core. Did you want to discuss the coding issue at this time, or would you rather we talk about these 2 first?
That's a separate issue, so I would talk about that later.
Okay. Well, let's talk first. I think it perhaps is the easier discussion about just eliminating the March 1st deadline. Are there thoughts or comments from the group about that?
I'd say more flexibility, the better.
I'm not against taking it out, but it would be good for us to know when a target date is that we would have to get it in so you have time to get it done. If you open it up till the 28th of August, we will probably be sending stuff in the 28th of August. So what would be a realistic date, maybe a recommended date, that by this date, if you want to get it in, something like that?
Are you saying if we open up by 28th of August, you would?
I'm saying is the core goes in effect the next fall. If you leave it open all the way, which we're doing for flexibility is great, but you'll have people submitting up to the last date to do that. You're saying 30 days back is what you need for processing. So what you're telling us is, instead of having a mandatory, maybe have a recommended. If you want to get this in for the fall, recommend that you meet this particular date.
Yes, I would think on a routine basis, if it comes in August, it should be dealt with in 30 days. That's reasonable. So if you need it by September 1st, you would have to.
Okay, so it would really help then if we kind of had like a period of review, as you were saying. In order to ensure timely review, it'll take about 30 days expectation.
Right, and if it comes close to when everybody does their catalogs, and that's the old March deadline, I would give a little bit more time and would say maybe it takes a little bit. If we have 30 institutions all of a sudden, we may not be able to do it in 30 days.
Right. So I think that's the question for you guys is how do you create a pipeline that allows for enough slots starting in
Right.
fall, say October 1, and then how do you reserve a slot and or get bumped to the
Yes.
next
And
earliest available slot?
It will be, I expect it to crunch up at crunch time, because if we open the course, if you really open up the course inventory February 1st, then some institutions will wait till then. And they may want to wait anyway because they have their own internal approval process, which takes time and so on. So if they print the catalog in April, they probably want to put it close to that.
Something that you might want to think about for the website as part of all of this is actually a timeline where there's a line to here's when we're looking at February opening up of course inventory. Here's a timeline of getting your new core submitted for review and approval, and so that people can actually see whether there's overlap or whether there's going to be any issues with when their timing for submitting core versus inventory issues.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Which is the reason for providing some sort of a target date for us, because if you say open all the way, yet you're saying you don't want people scrunched up at the end, if you could have a target saying there is no specific deadline, but there's a 30-day, and we, for processing purposes, we would appreciate inputs by a certain date, so to guarantee a fall term.
So, we can leave this also in the rules March 1st. The meaning of will not be approved to be effective for the upcoming academic year, I don't quite understand. Because we can approve it and it's effective right away, and why would it not be effective for the upcoming academic year? It depends on you when you can put it in the catalog or change your catalog. The approval makes it effective for the next academic year.
Right, and so, where I'm leading my institution, unless this inventory thing kicks it around, is I'd like to submit in fall. I'd like for people to get used to the idea of submitting, if you're going to present a new core situation, then we're going to submit in fall, because I want to make absolutely sure that we have time to plan our degrees, that we have time to really think about how our core interacts with our learning outcomes over all the programs and how it fits into program review. It's such a big part of the larger picture that I'd like them getting it done in fall for the following fall.
That's interesting, yeah. So I think your idea with a graphic timeline or table or whatever works out, including, the dates for the course inventory and all that, would be great.
I like the flexibility of wanting to change that date, but I understand what Fernando and Fred are both talking about, and I think that if you said in order for fall changes or fall approvals, if you're going to start something, make sure that you get it into the board for review and approval, 45 days prior to the start of the course or the program. That way that gives you some time, and that way it leaves the time open year-round, but people know that if they want to do this, they have to get it into the board, 45 days before. That gives you some time, and if they get it in that last couple of days, then you know what? They're out of luck. Because you've got so many schools here, and we're always changing our stuff, as you know. And I think, and you say it takes about a month, well, give yourself another 2 weeks and say any changes must be submitted 45 days prior to you're needing approval for offering the programs. And that way it's open-ended, it's all year round, and people should be able to work with that.
Okay, yeah, we can do that, but we don't need to do that, I think, with the rules. So
I agree. I think that if you look at the whole document that we're looking at here, the thing that is problematic is that when it's written in the rule, then it's hard to get around. And item B says institutions should follow the procedures posted on the website. So the procedures posted on the website could include information about timing and review.
Okay.
And taking it out of the rule makes it have the flexibility.
And I think reminding people, since we're only supposed to submit annually, once a year, what is the soonest date that you could submit in other words, right now, okay, if everybody's core is approved, what is the soonest date that you can submit to revise the core? And then those schools who, depending on, how their system works, if they submitted this fall and there was plenty of time, is there a chance that their core could change for the spring semester? And by change, I don't mean vast changes. It might be that once everybody got used to the new core, they might go, okay, there's some other courses that we want to consider in the optional area. And I think people are unsure now whether they could, if they submit this fall, can they make those changes in the spring, or do they have to wait all the way to the fall of 2015?
Yeah, so that doesn't matter to us, but it's a one-time.
Just as long as
one time, yes.
It sounds like it might be appropriate to handle this in two motions. One that relates to removal of the March 1st language in the rule as it's currently written, and a second motion that might address a recommendation to the coordinating board about communication of processing timelines when the process is open to start, and perhaps a deadline for, or a recommendation for, a submission date for programs that are looking to implement in the fall. Would anybody care to make a motion regarding the rule language?
So moved.
Let's see, and I can't see your name from here. Dan, thank you. A second?
Second, Juanita Flint.
Juanita. All in favor of striking the March 1st language from the rule, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now, the more complex one, I think, is a recommendation to the board regarding communication of the timeline. Anybody want to take a stab at that? A second to that motion?
I second.
From Fred. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Any abstentions? And that motion carries. So let's move to a discussion on the timing for the course inventory update. Any initial thoughts on that?
Can you turn your mic on? I don't think it's on. No, that's okay. Thank you.
In that it would be clear the different nuances related to when the course inventory activation occurs, and the different things that each institution needs to be aware of or careful about prior to making decisions based on that course inventory turn on.
Ronald, is the issue here that we're trying to create an overlap in the time when both course inventory and core changes can be submitted?
Yes, so that people who want to change certain aspects of their courses for the following academic year, like semester credit hours or course titles, can do that in the new year's course inventory without disturbing the old years, which is still used by students.
So I'm not familiar with the interface. When people adjust the course inventory, is it specific to an academic year, or is the problem that it's not?
It is. There's a tag for the year. Yeah. And so that we had this issue for this new core that institution had to enter their new courses into the quote-unquote old course inventory, not where the courses are not being used. They're just sitting there. But that is the only mechanism that we can pull in the courses into the core approval system.
Okay.
So in 2014, fall of 2014, then all the old inventory disappears and then all the new core gets activated? Is that kind of how the software is working?
No, the course inventory is just a big database of every course institution intends, wants, or actually is teaching.
Okay.
So it's just a big list of courses and course titles. And for the community colleges, it's actually the ACGM. So they don't. The community colleges don't worry about it.
Okay. All right.
So maybe I should have said that from the beginning.
Yeah, that would help.
Because all the courses in there are listed
are already
and
in the
can
inventory.
be pulled in.
Got it. Thank you.
For the
Thank
four-year
you.
institutions which have their own system,
Right.
they can pull those, but also their own. But they have to put it into the database.
Right. So they're going to need guidance on if they do add something to the inventory, then how is that going to affect or potentially affect their students' progression and or graduation and or awarding of credits. And would contact hours also be involved in this and reimbursement funding?
I assume so.
Okay,
yeah.
then that would be the best motivator probably of all of making sure this is all clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have said it's really the issue for the four-year institutions.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good.
Did you have a comment?
Texas.
No, you asked the question.
So I'm not. So help me. So the advantage of doing this is that institutions that are proposing changes to their core curriculum that aren't reflected in their current course inventory can solve that problem by having the course inventory change, which is really a proposal for the future. It's probably not changing something that's ongoing.
Well, let me give you an example. We have two institutions who, for the new core, the upcoming new core, wanted to drop their a few courses from 4 semesters to 3. Everything else stays the same. The title and the rubric, just hour switch. And they could not do that physically by entering that into the old system because it would have, because everything else stays the same, it would have messed up the students who are taking right now that course. Because they still need to have that put on their transcript. So as soon as the course inventory is open for the next year, they can make that change of just the semester credit hour because everybody next year will take it with that. And so we're waiting for the course inventory to open so that they get their correct info sheet for the new core with the correct semester credit hour. If you look at the sheet right now, it says 4 semester credit hour. But we are under the understanding, that we are going to change that.
But it's not possible to have changes to the course inventory that are intended to go into effect for next year be submitted earlier and just be held in a different category so they don't affect the current enrollment?
I understand it's just, because it's a continuing database. It's not a separate database that will mess up the... James, do you have more information about that?
Yes. Maybe Fred, you can borrow Fred.
Thank you. We worked with planning and accountability staff. This course inventory is really their process, not ours. And so we've talked with them about, because they have some constraints about how soon they can open it up, that course inventory for the next year. And it looks like something around February 1st is probably about the best that they can do. So it's what we need to hear, I guess, really is whether that's going to help the situation or not. Is that early enough for institutions to tell us about that prospective list of courses they plan to teach next fall so that they could use some of those courses for changes in the core curriculum. And that's really the issue.
So I would say, again, flexibility is great. Having it earlier is good. What problems will this create if we make the change to move it back to start in February? Will this still affect people that are currently enrolled?
No, it will not affect the students and
But what about students who start on the previous catalog year? I'm thinking of your example of the 4 hours to 3 hours. So if they started the core the previous catalog year, they'll still need the 4-hour class, correct? Unless they've been switched catalog years to the 3-hour class.
But the 4-hour class is no longer going to be taught.
I guess that's the question, right? But you said it's the same number and the same title, but the numbers change. So I'm just thinking advising students, which I do quite frequently, who are on different catalog years, than how to make that transition for them. And at our institution, we are still, I think, continuing until we need to with those kinds of classes. The science classes is where that's coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's, from the advising point of view, that's my question. How do you tell a student to negotiate that if they're on the previous core?
I would like to pose a question on the grounds that typically when course credits change, we do typically change the course number to reflect the number of credit hours being offered. So wouldn't it be reflected as a new course number and therefore be independent of the prior course numbering system?
Well, not necessarily for the four-year institutions because they use their own numbering system.
Isn't the last digit of the course number the number of semester credit hours?
If I recall correctly, that is the rubric for the Common Course numbering system, but some of us don't use the Common Course numbering system. And so for some of the 4 years that are on their own numbering system, the number of hours does not necessarily have any influence on the course number that's used.
Oh.
Yes, and that was exactly the problem with that one institution, at least, where I was on the phone and they talked to their registrar and changing that numbering system within the institution to just make clear the difference between the courses apparently was insurmountable. So that's why we said, okay, we wait till, it's the same course you input, it's just the semester credit hours different. We'll approve this one and we'll make the change when the course inventory is updated in April.
I'll have to say I don't know enough about this to know how to vote, but my instinct tells me that if we aren't just moving a time but opening a longer time, that people could always use the same date if they're worried about the change and if they understand the issues, and they could use the earlier date if it doesn't affect them and they understand it. Then I'm in favor of the change. If your staff are recommending it, I think it sounds like it solves one problem and doesn't create a new problem. I don't know. What do the rest of you think?
A couple of comments. I think James put his finger on one of the issues, and that is that the course inventory process and the core process were not necessarily aligned, that they were handled in two different units. And I think that did present a problem, at least it presented a problem for us this year in terms of when new courses or revised courses were actually put in the inventory and when they could then be addressed for core. The typical process in the four-year institutions is that as we go through course curriculum committees, that process usually occurs in the fall. So we do all of that through fall, and hence we have the March deadline. Now, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but because of that March deadline, we would do all of our course revisions during the fall and possibly January or February meeting to submit all new curriculum or revised curriculum into inventory by March. Then the core curriculum change was typically in October, which essentially meant that courses that you changed for inventory in one academic year would not be included in your core until the following year. So if I'm understanding correctly with this March flexibility change, that we would be able to, would it be possible then to submit new and revised courses in one academic year and then also make core changes for that upcoming academic year and not necessarily have to wait one full year?
Yes, that's exactly the idea, so that you make curricular decisions about new courses, including new core courses, during the fall. That spring, you submit that list of new courses to the course inventory. Now, those new courses are available for you to choose in the core curriculum system, and you can choose them, and then they'll be active, if approved, that following fall. So if you make some new courses that you submit in spring 2015, and then you submit a core curriculum change request in spring 2015, then that would be active, if approved, for fall 2015. That's exactly the idea. That's what we're trying to do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Are there additional questions or comments about the opening date for the course inventory?
I just had one quick question now. Did you say that if that's open early, institutions will have to submit them twice?
Yeah, if they make a change, if the new course inventory opens February 1st, and they make a change to the old inventory for the current year, where the students take the courses on February 15th, that will then not be translated or transmitted to the new one, so they have to make it twice. Physically go in and make the change in the old one and the new one.
Just in that overlapping period?
Yes.
Okay.
If they made it January 15th, when it wasn't open, it would be there.
Just for clarification, an institution that wanted to propose a new course to start the forthcoming fall and to perhaps use that course in their core curriculum, they would only need to submit once?
Yeah, they would make it in the new one and wouldn't touch the old one, yes.
Okay.
So I'd like some clarification again that what's being proposed here would not prevent current practice from happening. Is that right? That people could still submit at the regular time they've been submitting and only been allowed to submit, have no change, not have to submit twice?
Right.
Or if they wanted for some reason to submit something earlier than that, they could do that. And that may carry the consequences of having to submit twice.
The difficulty is that it's really affecting people who don't think about the core. It's the registrar who makes a change in February thinking, oh, this will be there come April when I do the next year's work. Mm-hmm. And if the registrar does that in March, he may think, or she may think, it will be there in April, because normally it opened up in April. Well, it opened up in February then, and it will not be there. So it's really that time span, 2-month time period, where people who don't think about the core have to know that course inventory exists in dual motion. They have to do it twice. So that may lead to complications because people forget, and then it's not there. I mean, they will find out when they don't see it, but it's different than what they did last year.
Right. So could an institution make multiple changes at different times, so they could, for instance, enter new courses that have no input on the current semester because they're not being taught, but they will be taught in the fall, so they could be included in the core early, and then later on, at the traditional time frame, submit additional changes to existing courses so they wouldn't affect students currently enrolled?
That's my understanding of the process, yes.
I think part of the issue is that, as I understand it, even currently, the course inventory portal is open, I believe, twice a year, not just once a year. The difference, I think, is that changes to core are typically correlated with your catalog year. So when a student comes in on a core curriculum that's associated with that catalog, new courses don't necessarily impact that. I mean, you may have courses that affect core or upper division or anywhere else. which is why I was puzzled to response to Colleen's question, because if you were changing your core in spring, how would that affect your core catalog year? Or would it just be additions to core, so that your basic core would be the same, but there may be new courses that will now be able to apply to, that will meet core curriculum requirements? Was that your question? Yeah.
That was my question, because at the two-year colleges, we work with the ACGM, and I think this first go-around with the core curriculum and getting it approved, we went through a very rigorous process, and then I think now they might spend some more time on other courses that might be a part of the optional area, and not that they would change anything they've already approved, but they might want to add some to the option.
My only observation is that in trying to follow all the imagined scenarios and times of submission and counting backwards 45 days, and there's the spring and the fall and the catalog, is that it could be overwhelming to keep all of that straight. So if there is a way to reduce the number of target dates, like we have, for example, a census roster date. We all know that. It's the 12th day, and it's simple. But if all these other things are due, they can begin at a certain time, they could end at another time, counting backwards and all that, I just think it could be administratively difficult to track. So
that's why I like Fernando's idea of making a little graph and like in a proposal timeline, where you and maybe have a green time window when everything should be okay if you submit it then, instead of saying March 1st, from October 1 till March 1st or February 1st or something, and then have a different indication when the course inventory is open, and put it as time windows, so that gives the institution flexibilities with their approval deadlines. It is. What was the word used? Squirrely, the whole process. Yes.
So, if opening it early is designed to solve this one problem, is there a way to open it privately early for people who are just being affected by this problem?
I don't know, but from the way Doug Parker talked about it, I don't think that's how it works. But I would have to ask him. I'm pretty sure it does not work like that, because we have gone to him and asked him, these are the institutions which would like to make this change. And it's an involved process for that division, because there are many other things tied in which we don't know. So, they have to work for this opening. It doesn't happen in one day. It's a process. And it's not an individual.
Okay. So the only downside, it sounds like, is that in the overlap period, there may be courses lost in the new course inventory if whoever is entering them at the institution doesn't realize they weren't rolled over because of the opening.
Right. But as far as I understand, it doesn't mean they can't be added when they are remembered.
They're found.
Yes.
Is there a clear pathway on the website or the submission for saying this is your current and this is your proposed inventory?
No, it's only I think you see the current inventory.
Okay. All right. Is there somebody in the building that could answer questions regarding this? I mean, representing the accountability folks?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
One thing I'd kind of like to throw back to a comment that Fred made earlier on the grounds that this is the idea of opening the date earlier. It's not creating a new mandatory date it must be submitted by. And as Fred mentioned earlier, institutions have a lot of things on their plates, and inevitably we're going to be going toward what is the deadline of when it's due, as opposed to when is the possible earliest we can submit things. So we may not have that many schools rushing to submit that early, and that may not crater this double kind of ghost imaging effect of courses that we're kind of fearing, or at least not many.
Well, I don't know, because it's this courses that are changed without the purpose of the core, which are in danger of being forgotten or lost. You know, if somebody sits there and says, okay, I need to finish my new core changes by March 1st so I can get it into the catalog, they probably think of it. But it's the registrar who deals with some student concern in March, and that has to be changed, and I don't know why, but apparently it happens. That person will not think of the next year, may not think of the next year's course inventory, and do it only for the current year, and then next year the same issue pops up, and they have to do it over again. I did it already, and yes, it wasn't forwarded. That is the issue, I understand.
Is it, I mean, or is it already done? I'm not familiar with this. But is there a course, you get a printout of what was your course inventory and then what is your course inventory with kind of a yellow, these were the changes that were made? Is there any kind
as I understand it, and herein lies the problem. I think, as James mentioned, it is typically in separate units here. It is also typically in separate units at every college and university, because the course inventory is actually submitted through the portal, through the coordinating board portal, at particular times of the year, and that is why we have had typically at the four-year institutions this pattern of behavior wherein we revise curriculum and then submit it into the inventory. If you ask your person at your college to go into the portal, you will see a list of every course that remains in your inventory. Now, you can add a course and not necessarily remove another course, but you can't have two courses that are the same. For example, you would not have, in our case, we would not have two courses that carry the same TCCN number, because that will make transfer impossible. But you can leave a course in your inventory, and we might leave a course in the inventory, for example, that we are not currently teaching, but that we will accept as equivalent from a community college just to facilitate transfer. As to whether you have a proposed inventory, that would be at the institution level. In other words, you would know, okay, this is what we're working on, these are the courses we're going to submit as soon as that window opens. So when we go through curriculum committee, and we will wait until that the window opens with the accountability folks so that we can submit those new courses. The problem was previously that only happened at particular times, and then if we wanted to submit something for core, we had to wait to the following year. So I'm hopeful that this would address that.
I'm looking at the course inventory right now, and there's a pull-down menu for all the academic years, and the last one right now is 2013-14. And so I assume in April, when the new inventory opens, that a new date shows up here. And you can see the old one, and you can see the new one. I mean, you can search the old one, and you can search the old one, new one.
That's the question I have. I'm asking a dumb database person, thinking if it's archived by the date. I mean, a lot of data systems allow you to start the next date. You can populate it when you're ready to submit. You submit it, but you keep it by date. So I don't know. You know, if you already have the pull down a field for when the date is, I don't see why there'd be a problem. You just say the next date for the next series, and that's the proposed when you're ready to submit the next proposed. And I guess he's sitting right here, so.
Hi, I'm Doug Parker from Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, the director of the Educational Data Center. And I've been watching these proceedings for about 4 minutes, so if y'all could bring me up to speed, basically, on the questions.
Doug, we were discussing the implications you mentioned to me of changing the opening date for the new academic year course inventory to an earlier date and the pitfalls for institutions and the advantages with the core. And so I guess we're not quite clear how that works for people who are actually doing the work.
Doing the work in
entering changes, and somebody putting in a change in March and to the current course inventory and
right. Well, currently we're receiving the spring 2014 data right now for from all the institutions, and so people are. And I think this affects universities more than community colleges, if I understand. And when they're purporting their classes and all that, there may have been a change at some point between the fall and spring semesters. So they'll need, if they report a class for, say, 4 semester credit hours and it's out there for 3, they'll need to do a modification to the course inventory, university course inventory, with a what we refer to as a CBMO 03 update. And what we've tried to do in the past is wait to quote unquote roll over 2013 to 2014, until most of the institutions have finished doing that. Because what happens is that if they do a modification to the 2013, then they'll need to do it to the 2014 at the same time to have that data updated out there, because 13 and 14 are 2 separate lists, basically. And so we just kind of always waited to do that, kind of as a courtesy to help the institutions out so they didn't have to do multiple modifications to multiple things. We can roll that anytime we want. I understand that the application out there that you use to put your core in is pulling the latest data out of the file. So once we roll over to 2014, it'll only be pulling 2014 data out there. So does that semi-answer y'all's question?
So when an institution makes a change, it is rolled over, does it ask them for which year it is, or does it in generally, if you make a change, ask for which year?
Well, there's a year that they put in on that record when they're doing their updates that say, they have to specify which year they are updating the data into.
Right.
So is the problem that the core submission portal requires a course to be in the current year, and could that be changed so that it could also look for future years if the core proposal is submitting something for a future year?
Well, I think it's just one database, so it pulls the most current information out.
Right.
But if we were proposing a new course for next year to be in the core, and we put it into the course inventory to start the next year, not the current year, would the proposal system be able to find that and approve it?
Yes, that's actually what the institutions did this year. So we worked with UT Register.
But they were struggling because I think at some point they thought they had to put it into the current year's inventory because there was no year definition or something.
They did put the future courses from fall 14 into the 13-14 course inventory, which they didn't first like to do.
Right.
But
why couldn't they put them into the 14-15 inventory?
Because it's not there yet. It's only when it's rolled over.
We're not allowed to put 14-15 in as the year?
Not until we quote unquote roll it over, put the new one in.
So, yeah.
Well, thinking about how it would affect our institution, this would work well for us. I don't have any concerns about it.
Fernando, did you have any more specific questions for Doug from what you were alluding to earlier, or have they been answered?
Yeah, I think one of the things. One of the things to think about is the coordination of the different houses, and a regular, kind of communication period or assessment of how these reports intersect or interact, or any potential issues, or if y'all are changing something, so that Reinhold and his folks are aware of what is it that we need to do differently or communicate to the institutions, and then also perhaps for our own institutions to have those silos kind of develop a more regular reporting process, so that there isn't a matter of a person forgetting what happens, or if there's a way for even for us to do visual, if and this may or may not be possible, but if you were able to say, so for 11-12, here was the inventory, and then there were changes made from this to this, and they're in yellow. From the following year, they're in blue, and the following year, they're in green. And then that would be kind of a way that people could search for, okay, what are the patterns in our curriculum? What changes are we making? And then that might let your chief academic officers and your curriculum committees look at your patterns as well. So it allows for the course inventory to become an assessment and planning tool as well. And that's just not necessarily a related thought, but it's a way to kind of bring the houses together.
Okay. Just as a point of clarification, as long as you're planning for the future, this isn't really an issue, from what I understand. It's only if you're making the change in the current year. And so for us, our curriculum process in the fall, we input everything for the catalog by March. We're fine. Okay.
Again, that's in terms of inventory.
Right.
But if you're trying to make a core change, typically you would have done that, and you would not have been able to submit your core change until October. So then your core change, even though the course is now in your inventory, it would not officially have been a part of your core until the subsequent academic year.
It sounds like to me the issue is not the core curriculum software, because it allows you to differentiate by year. The issue is the course inventory system that can be modified, that used to pull the data in. So I think that seems to be the issue I'm hearing, is that you have the years within the course inventory system is what the issue is.
Well, yeah, I mean the front end that y'all all see that you're putting your core in, I mean that's going to pull the latest inventory in. So right now that's the 13-14 one. It seemed like everything was going fine until it seemed like there was a couple, and correct me if I'm wrong, there were a couple of institutions that wanted to modify the number of semester credit hours or whatever for certain courses that were going to be put in their core, but they wanted to keep the same course numbers and everything. If you change your course number, then you could put those on there right now without any problem. But for some reason, some didn't want to do that.
Right.
I guess from the perspective of a four-year institution, I see that there would be benefit in just having perhaps a wider window of operations on this. I think clear instructions, particularly it sounds like if an institution wants to propose a new course and then also have it considered for core curriculum inclusion for the same implementation period, they need to be aware that they need to submit it for the existing list of inventory, but also going forward. And I think very explicit instructions about how to do that need to be provided so that there is not this issue of courses just kind of dropping out of the inventory after the fact. Are there additional questions or thoughts on this? Seems like we're having a little trouble getting everything to talk to each other for the demonstration.
I think that, I'm not really aware of how the system works, but if we do have explicit instructions, like step-by-step instructions, and more detail distinguishing what the course changes are and then the actual core is, and besides that, including actual visuals, on like timelines saying if you're going to change your core, if you change it by February, by March, it will not be implemented until this date. That way, the person that's submitting the changes is aware of when the changes will actually be implemented.
Are we to a point where we might be ready to at least put a motion on the table regarding a recommendation about the opening date for the degree or the course inventory database?
Could you remind us in a quick summary what the main topic we're talking about?
I believe that we are talking about a recommendation that the course inventory be opened on February 1st. And that where there may be a situation that the inventory needs to be changed for both the current year and the forthcoming year, that very explicit instructions be provided to institutions so they know whether or not this is something that they need to worry about, and whether or not there are specific actions that need to be taken to make certain that they don't get themselves into a difficult situation.
So moved.
So motion by Fred. Do we have a second? Second by Beth. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? One abstention. Motion carries. Thank you. Reinhold, I think you're still in the hot seat because you've got the coding question that comes next.
Yes. Thank you, Doug. I'm sure we'll be working together more in the coming year. So if you flip the rules page over to the front page, you see that we are thinking about some changes for the transcript code of the core courses. And basically what occurred to us, or to me, and Larry mentioned that issue to us, so we were somewhat alerted when we printed out the information sheets about the core that was sent to you. It is not transparent in what part or with what type a course is affiliated in the component area option. As you recall, there are two ways to enter a course into component area option. 3 to 6 semester credit hours can be put into the part A, where every course has to adhere to an FCA, foundational component area, just as if that course is in a foundational component area. Or there is the option B, where a course does not have a specific alignment with an FCA. It still has to adhere to any of the FCAs, but it's also not tied to the core objectives of that particular FCA. So, only a minimum of 3 core objectives have to be addressed, and any which one can be picked. So it's a way of give a very flexible way to offer a course. And only 3 semester credit hours from the 42 in the core can be taken from that area. So it's because of the flexibility, it's restricted, but it's a useful tool for the institutions. So if we just were to tag, we have a 3-digit code. We are using 1 digit, the middle digit. If you just use the last digit to show which FCA is aligned with that particular course, then we have transparency, and automatically a student or a counselor can see how many courses can be taken, because if the 3rd digit would be 0, it would be from the part B where there is no FCA. And so on a student's transcript with 42 successfully taken hours, only 1 or 3 semester credit hours, it could be lapse, et cetera, et cetera. 3 semester credit hours could have 090. And that's basically the recommendation, that we specify the transcript codes in this way to create this transparency.
I think this is great, and it's a vast improvement over the previous version, I think, because one of the questions we're having is, transcripting. I think we're all looking at that now, and that'll help us certainly with the component area option. The other thing that we've been asking is, how will an FCA be deemed complete? Because as the new core does not simply say you have to have the whole core to be complete, but each FCA, once it's complete and has to be transferred as is into the receiving institution. So is it a matter of, is there going to be, or was there some thought about a designation that would determine FCA complete for, say, communication, or FCA complete for
Are you talking about a student's transcript?
Yeah, I'm talking about the student's transcript. If that would come in, if there's been some conversation or discussion about how you lock that in so that, again, people don't necessarily unpack it.
The hours for each FCA are specified. So math, it's 3. Life and physical sciences, it's 6.
Right.
So then as soon as they add up to 6, then...
Okay, so we're letting math kind of make that determination.
Yeah, that's...
Okay. And that can work. I think that may be something we'll revisit after we try the new core out, and a lot of it's going to depend on the transfer institutions and how they treat the FCAs, and whether we get a lot of feedback from students saying you guys are unpacking the FCAs, and then saying and it may be allowed flexibility where your transfer institution might say, okay, this course that you took for creative arts really fits better in our social behavioral science core, that kind of concept, but that's always the devil in the details for us.
Ronald, my question, I guess, with the coding, the designation within the CAO as to which of these areas it would fall into is designed primarily to determine how we assess those courses. Because when we had that particular designation within the CAO and we had to choose the alignment, that would determine how those courses are assessed. They would be assessed with the similar outcomes as those within that foundational area. My concern is that some institutions may look at the 9-1, 9-2, 9-3, 9-4 and say, okay, this student completed a 9-4 at X institution, but we don't need a 9-4. We need a 9-3. For example, the way we look at CAO when we take it and transfer, and I realize we may be the minority, but if we determine that a student has completed the CAO at another institution, we grant them complete at TWU. I realize a lot of institutions don't do that, but I fear that if a receiving institution looked at this and said, okay, they have a 9-1 and a 9-2, but we have a 9-3 and a 9-4, that those courses would not transfer in toward the CAO. Now, I realize that may not be the intent of the coding, but I fear an unintended consequence there.
But if the CAO is complete, it has to be transferred in. And actually, if a course is described as 094 and the student and has that as an extra course for whatever reasons, the receiving institution could then easily, or should actually, by the intent, allow it as their FCA 040. So if the transparency is not there, it may be hard to say, okay, this course was taught under language, philosophy, and culture, so we can take it actually and apply it, to this FCA.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an issue that's going to revolve around people who take liberal arts kind of at our institutions and then try to fit into a more direct degree plan. I think our 2+2s and or transfer alignments that we have with our institutions at the community college level with our regional universities should alleviate a lot of this issue. But at the broader sense, statewide, that is going to be kind of a test case for how the receiving institutions kind of work with the core and these designations and make determinations of, well, in our CAO, we want 094, but they have an 093. Okay, we can take their what's already in their 093 and we can shuffle it around, and then it becomes kind of a new designation of their core within your institutions.
Okay, I think I've got you. So instead of the new coding then would allow the receiving institution to be able to look at that and say, yes, this institution used it, applied it to the CAO. However, the coding would allow us to determine more quickly that it is a course aligned with a particular FCA, and if we did not need to apply it in the CAO, we could apply it to that FCA.
I think that's allowable within the legislation to do that. My concern is that there's somehow ends up being a gap or a problem with the fit, and then but that CAO, if they completed all the FCAs in the CAO, then the receiving institution has to put it somewhere in the 120 hours.
Sure.
Without kicking it out. The other issue that we came up with, and maybe other institutions are having it with your software packages, this is another technology thing, is, we had a lot of 4s. We had, biologies, anatomy and physiology, we had our, physics and a few other 4s that now we're splitting into 3 1s to allow for the move into the CAO of the 1 credit hour. We are having some issues with DataTel and how courses are assigned or aligned within our software packages, and so we're getting some kickback of how we're gonna work that internally. I was wondering, there hasn't been any discussion on the DataTel or Ellucian statewide group about doing this or helping us out with this. So I was wondering, is PeopleSoft or is Banner, is this an easy thing? Or are you guys starting to get some static from your folks? Or are we alone? Which is fine. We can figure it out.
I'll tell you, you're not alone, and it's not working in any of those systems.
Okay.
So it's not just a DataTel issue. We're a DataTel institution, and we can't get DataTel to talk to colleague, to talk to other but I understand from other institutions, it's the Banner folks are having the same kinds of
Is that something that would be appropriate for this
issues.
body to recommend to the coordinating board to have a conversation with, the vendors for the state? Because it looks like we're going to need a statewide solution of some kind to help us do this. Is that an appropriate thing to ask, or am I out of line? No answer. Okay, I'll take it.
We're advisory to the coordinating board, and so I think that we have the option of providing recommendations of any nature. And so, are there other thoughts or questions about the coding system that is being proposed? Yes.
Here's my. I like the 9192, et cetera. My institution, and I don't think we're alone in this, students can choose to take something from our list of CAO, or they can take any other core course that they've already taken. So, for example, maybe they took college algebra to satisfy the math component, and then they take calculus as CAO. How's that coded? I mean,
if an institution wants to do that, they pull the courses into the CAO. So on the on the listing of all the core courses, calculus would appear in the CAO. It could also, that's the only way a course can show up twice, in an FCA and a CAO. And it's an institutional decision, and some are more inclusive in the CAO than others. But there's, and so, for example, if you have Calculus 1, it can be in the FCA and in the CAO. Calculus 2 should show up only in the CAO because Calculus 1 is prerequisite, so that fulfills the math FCA and has to be applied there. So Calculus 2 cannot be applied to the FCA, but it can be applied to the CAO.
Right.
But if there's a placement exam.
Right. There's that. It depends on the institution, I think, is really the strategy.
Let me ask a question. That answers your question then. If it does, if Calculus 1 appears both in the foundations area and the CAO, does it have to have, I guess it's whatever number, and 09 something as well?
It appears twice, and wherever the student takes it would would be accounted for. So it's available as 03. 03.
02.
020.
Oh, math. Yes,
Right.
020 or 092.
So it'll have to be labeled depending where it's at either way. So there will be some courses, we also did the same thing, that will have two designations
Right.
depending where they're at.
One course
Right.
with two.
And right now they're listed twice, but only with 090. So
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I like this too. I think the more information that we're providing as sending institutions, the better for the receiving institution.
Agreed.
Are we ready to propose a motion for a recommendation regarding adoption of this more specific coding for the component area option?
So moved.
Let's see. Was there a second? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now we're actually a little ahead on the agenda, which I don't think is going to disappoint anybody. Reinhold, did you have any other items of business related to the core or other things? Melinda?
no, no, I don't. I wonder maybe lunch is already here or not yet. They normally come early when we need them early. So lunch should be here any minute.
Shall we take a break for lunch and then reconvene after lunch? I guess if we break at 11:30, let's plan on reconvening at 12:30 to restart our discussions on the subcommittee reports. And I think that'll give us plenty of time to do our email and make some phone calls and all of that other stuff. And so we'll reconvene at 12:30, and hopefully we'll have lunch soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
If we can't get a little bit more business done here over the next few hours, or maybe not even that much. When we last met in November, there was much discussion about the 60 credit hour limits that are coming into effect for two-year degrees. And there were a couple of recommendations that were affiliated with that. One was that very specific information about the process for submitting information about two-year degrees be forwarded from the coordinating board to impacted schools. A copy of the email that went out in that regard is included in your agenda packet. And from the note at the top of this, it looks like the email was disseminated on March 14th. Were there any specific questions about the email or the guidance that was provided therein? I can see that many of you are still reading, but I'm assuming since there's not been just like a whole bunch of hands fly into the air that many of you probably have already seen this. I'm from a four-year school, and so this is the first time I've actually seen this memorandum. But
yeah, I think from the conversations we've had on our campus, and I had an email from my dean over the business professional technical education area that highlighted several of the elements, and they're all addressed here. So I was glad to see the thorough nature of considering the clinical practice, the internships, as well as I don't know that this horse is out of the barn, as it were, but just the whole concept of treating the applied, the Associates of Applied Sciences the same as a transfer degree still seems to me a problematic comparison. And so I don't know that. I think the initial intent is to try, again, time to completion, and I get that. I do think that we're going to find quite a few more courses or more programs that are going to meet the requirements of extending beyond 60. And some, I know that nobody wants to necessarily address it, but some are going to have to go beyond 70 because it's just the practice and the competencies, and especially those fields like allied health and nursing, where life and death is the issue. We do not want to have a situation where we're opening up potential liabilities because our students don't have enough time in task. Some other skills take longer time than say taking a normal humanities course. ASL is something that came up in our discussions. Being an interpreter, with the growing requirements across the state, going from an associate's to a bachelor's to practice as an interpreter, the requirements of the different kinds of interpreting. It's not just one type of field. These are some of the things that perhaps in future we can look at just the rationale behind it and maybe provide better guidance for the difference between a transfer degree and an applied studies degree. But as far as the recommendations of this body, the subcommittee, I was very encouraged by the listing out of the recommendations for review on exceeding the 60-hour limit.
Actually, have provided this beautiful segue to our next discussion. Before we move on, were there any other comments about the memo with instructions about the reporting?
Some of the comments I got from some of the staff at my college was that if other colleges are going to be doing it, and a student has the choice between paying for 60 versus 72, of course they're probably want to go to the college that they can get it at for 72 hours. However, there's not a lot of data yet on how the students are going to do on boards yet. So that may impact this greatly. We may have to come back to the drawing board. Those of us that are, we have our 60-hour curriculum in our back pocket. We haven't implemented it yet, but we're ready to go with it. But I'm just kind of waiting around to see what other people are going to do on the boards. Also, what our advisory boards are saying, a lot of them are very concerned that we're cutting back so many hours. But here again, it all goes back to money. I agree with Fernando that time to completion is important, but there's some things that just take longer to get, and so we'll see if the colleges can do this, but time will tell.
Well, if there aren't additional comments about the email, certainly we have kind of gotten into a discussion a little bit about justifications for exceeding the 60-hour credit limit. And as you may recall, in November there was a recommendation to have subgroups meet to discuss potential exemptions or request justifications for exceeding the 60 credit hour limit, and also strategies for building basic skills concepts into the curriculum. That group, actually, we thought at first that we would probably form subcommittees or two separate groups on that. We wound up just meeting as an entire group for both discussions. Met on the 21st of February and came up with some recommendations regarding each topic. So I would suggest that we take a look first at the document that's the justifications for exceeding the 60 credit hour limit. I'll give you a couple of minutes to take a look at that, and then maybe we'll kind of come back with some ideas and figure out as a group whether or not we want to make any formal recommendations to the board. Are there any thoughts or comments?
Is what we're trying to do here move recommendations from the subcommittee to become recommendations of this committee or to the board?
I was assuming that that was the appropriate process.
So the question is this the right content and format,
Exactly.
or should it be modified?
Exactly.
I was wondering if and somebody on the subcommittee could provide clarification on the last 3 bullet points regarding, well, the use of the ACGM, WECM courses, what you guys were thinking at that point, and the college success courses, since those are right now looked at as kind of in the CAO of the core.
I'll take a stab at that. There are several people who are involved in that discussion who are with us today, and so y'all chime in if I don't get it right. What I understand is that where you build a curriculum using building blocks that are defined in the ACGM or the WECM, that you might come up with a package that does not add exactly to 60 credit hours. And so that listing was to try to provide some minor flexibility, a couple of credit hours in either in the over 60 direction, to try to help programs that found themselves in that situation. The college success courses, I don't think that it has been universally adopted that those fit into the CAO, and I would really appreciate feedback from some of the others of you to your schools as to whether or not that is truly the case.
We don't try to get it in the CAO. I guess we'll try again next year, but we're seeing more and more, at least in number of initiatives going on in the community college, the call for college success courses. And one of the points here is if we're being, as best practices are coming out in the different initiatives, I'm thinking Mathways from the community college area, where you now have to have, especially in some of the areas, college a learning frameworks course. If that's required for all courses, all different degrees and programs within a particular college, in the past, that used to be handled, at least in the WECM side, you didn't necessarily have to count that towards the total hours. So the question is, if we're required, that, depending how many hours you offer, that can also offset the total number of hours in a degree.
And that may be a way to word it rather than the way it's currently worded is, state-mandated initiatives or education initiatives like Mathways or others, that be figured into the equation when determining overall credit hours for that degree plan. That might be a way to get around that. And absolutely, I'm glad that you guys brought up the not exactly 60 hours, because in our degree plan refits with the new core, we had some that, it would work with 59 or 61, but to get us exactly to 60, we had to kind of fit this course or this sequence of courses, which is not optimal, but to meet the 60. And that became a common refrain, to meet the 60. And so that may be for future consideration, is just how it works with the degree learning outcomes, and if there are flexibility in terms of a 1 or 2 degree flex, 1 or 2 credit hour flex to adjust, to work with that.
I think, Fernando, you had asked about the bottom 3, and the other category is just kind of a recognition that there could be something that's going on at a particular institution that's unique there, and so there should be an opportunity for the institution to define something that makes sense for them.
Absolutely. That's great. I really appreciate the work of the subcommittee. This is very good.
What's the expectation in terms of these justifications? Is that if you choose one of these, that your exemption is automatically approved, or that all exemptions have to are expected to fall in these? I mean, it's not clear to me what we're proposing.
Well, I think that could be something we discussed today. I would particularly appreciate feedback from the 2-year schools on what would be most helpful. Is this a menu that's available to you as possible options for providing justifications? Would it be more useful to request that the board consider adopting these as standing justifications that could be called upon based on the needs of the curriculum? Your thoughts?
I would like to see, I'm in a 2-year school, see some flexibility like Fernando was suggesting to say 59 to 63 credit hours, to have some flexibility there with that, trying not to stay right at 60. But there's also other compelling reasons for some of the programs to ask for an exemption, and those are the programs that we listed. They're about exceeding the 60-hour limit for the following fields: the workforce programs, vet tech, engineering, allied health, and nursing. When we were discussing all of these, those are the ones that we globally considered. I'm sure there may be some others, but we thought whatever others were, they could be dovetailed into one of those categories, and that way if they wanted to request for a waiver, they could. And that there needs to be some sort of online form or process that the institution could pull up, fill it out, and then submit to ask for the waiver.
There's such variations, so many variations across the state as far as different workforce programs and healthcare programs, and whether they require 64 credits or 73 credits. And what I'm wondering is, I think the subcommittee came up with some very good recommendations for it. These are the kinds of things that would be considered. I like that they were descriptive instead of just saying these programs. These things would be considered as far as if it has more than 60 hours. But I also wonder if on some of these programs, such as nursing, if they're just like we do the field of studies in the state, if we could have a statewide agreement that if you choose this nursing curriculum, and of course it would be developed by our nursing faculty from across the state, then you can automatically know you have this many hours. If you're trying to go with something different on your own, then you're going to have it individually approved by the coordinating board. So I don't know if that's possible, but I think when we bring people across the state together and we come up with curriculum ideas, instead of reinventing it and the coordinating board staff having to approve 50 different AD and curriculum, I don't know. What are your thoughts about that as far as a way to approach it?
Catherine?
Well, I was on the subcommittee, and when I came down, I thought, we were going to try to do a statewide sort of agreement so there'd be some consistency rather than one school having an exception for 72 and somebody else for 69, for the same degree, or somebody else gets it down to 64. So, and I understand that that's not possible right at this moment, and we came up with this list of possible things that might be applicable to your school. What I really liked about the list, at least, is the fact that it had things in it that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about, and I thought, oh, yeah, I do that too, but I just would not have thought about that as being applicable. So I kind of liked the idea if they had some form online, that was fairly standardized, where they could give you kind of a checklist. Yes, I have an advisory board and they want this, and yes, we have, some sort of other requirement or licensure, or, so that you could kind of get conversation starters almost. And then the way I had sort of envisioned it is that you would click saying, yes, I believe I have this exception. And then in it, you would have to upload something that shows why you have that exception, maybe a letter from your advisory board, or, something from the school you're transferring to, or, some sort of justification other than yes, and just go through and click them all. And then the other, of course, since everybody's slightly different. But I do see it, I feel sorry for the co-board, because I think they're going to be inundated by however many schools there are with all of these degrees, with people in especially those two areas. To start with, the health fields and the engineering, I think pretty much everybody's going to start looking at that, especially with the advisory boards being very concerned, rather than okay, we'll make exceptions for this. And maybe, is it possible that if enough schools ask for exception, that you might grant a particular degree an overall exception? Is that even a possibility, that if there's enough interest?
I want to add one clarification to what I said to make sure it's not misunderstood. If we did work across the state and articulate, for instance, in an ADN program, I'm not saying that we're saying everybody in the state has to follow that. I'm just saying if they choose to, then this one is set at this and approved because it was worked out with the coordinating board and with faculty from across the state. If they choose their own curriculum that's different, they could still submit that, as an option. So that's what I'm
right. You had mentioned the
with.
field of studies, which I know from the engineering side, because they got the state together and then they followed it up with the tuning committees to get us all on the same page, which was ideal. So, but I just thought that, even if because if we can't do that right now for these areas, is there a possibility that if enough people ask for individual exceptions that it could lead to a kind of, I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up as a question for the co-board.
Yeah. And to tag off of that, Catherine, first question, is there political will? All right. What kind of directive has the staff gotten in terms of how seriously to take the idea of an exemption? Because there's no point in us even trying to rigmarole this if the legislature basically has said, look, 60 is really what we want, and we're only really going to bend over backwards for a few things here and there. Or has there really been a lot of leeway for a rational and logical discussion about student learning outcomes, licensures, and success rates relevant to this conversation?
Well, I think the precedent is given to this for how the 120 hours at the four-year institution is handled, and that includes answers to both these questions. A, it's an individual process. The electrical engineering at Texas A&M is not tied to that at Tarleton in semester credit hours, and they work it out how it is best for their students and come forward with that plan. And also, yes, there are four-year degree programs which have more than 120 hours. And so the exception is worked with and dealt with. Okay. One advantage, from my point, if you don't do it globally, you take away incentive for creativity and improvement. If you do it individually, people will find ways to work with it, and it may not be this year, and maybe a little bit this year, maybe a little bit more next year. So that way, it's a better way to go forward to learn how to deal with it.
What I like about what we're looking at here in terms of the recommendations of the subcommittee is it provides different categories under which an exemption or an exception might be made, and then it allows the institution to make the individual case for theirs. But to add to Catherine's perspective then, or question is, if it's possible, if we're seeing patterns at the coordinating board in terms of submissions, if maybe that might justify or lock into a kind of conversation for a statewide field of study and or four-year plan that aligns the different institutions together along certain rationale. I know the nursing curriculum, there's a kind of an attempt to try to bring that alignment together so that we have this kind of a statewide view of nursing. It might be that there's enough congruence with ASL interpreting, or there's enough congruence in terms of HVAC that, statewide, that we might want to look at then a field of study or something along those lines, an AAS version of that. So again, we take the information that we're getting as individual colleges, and you guys are at the staff are identifying. Okay, yes, this does meet the threshold of an exception. This doesn't, and then as we do that, we're developing an iterative process for saying, okay, when there needs to be more clarification here on what an exception would be in this particular field. Maybe we can provide some guidance. Depending on whether the institution is providing a strong enough rationale, and also we can look at statewide patterns. And you guys can help coordinate us into looking at these overall degree plans from the state level and the different patterns that we may not even be aware of going on.
I'm sort of hearing two questions right now. The first one involves how to use the sample justifications that are on the front part of the page. And the second is what to do should there be a situation where there are numerous justification requests within a particular discipline. Fred, I think I interrupted you. What was your comment?
Well, actually, that second part is, I think, summarized at the back of the document, the last section, saying these are some areas where we expect to see some trends just like that. And I think that starts that part of that discussion. I just want to also emphasize for the record that the subcommittee as a whole, and it's in the statement here, we are in good faith going to try to hit the 60-hour where possible. These are not meant to be ways to get out of the 60 hours. It's more of we are going to try to hit the 60 hours, but to the best of our ability, these are the areas we'll be a little bit off. And I just want to make sure that the folks that we were sending this to understand that this isn't a way out of something. It's more of a way of how to deal with the rule with our existing situation.
So let me propose that we make a decision about the justification categories first, and then come back to our discussion about what we might suggest as a process to handle many requests, or where there might be discipline-specific needs that have not been addressed or might need to be addressed separately. Anybody have a strong idea about what we might recommend regarding the justifications?
I sort of see this almost in a formal proposition language where you say, whereas there are so many extenuating circumstances that would warrant making an exception, that the legislature or whoever ultimately sees this consider those and allowing flexibility. Almost as if to, I don't know, it may be to educate them, kind of. This list, I think, does that. It shows that there are so many constraints and other factors that could impinge on a college's ability to stay within that narrow parameter that the board recommends this.
So is the recommendation is that the Ueac recommends to the board that these justifications or these potential justifications for exceeding the 60 credit hour limit be recognized? Do I have a motion?
I make the motion.
Okay. Juanita, a second. Marnita, as a second. Is there further discussion?
So just to be clear, is this motion to acknowledge that these are legitimate but not necessarily automatically approved, or is it to say this is a justification that wins the day?
I would personally, and this is just Ann speaking, I would be uncomfortable saying that this is just guaranteed. I think that there does bear a need for the institution to provide some sort of evidence that the request for justification is valid.
Right, and it could be could be presented as, here are the possible categories or zones under which an exception would be considered, and then so if you select licensure and clinical practice, then you would provide details then as to how your specific institution has to work with those.
You could also use the phrase including all of these but not limited to.
I
agree with that.
I think our biggest concern was the willingness of the legislative coordinating board to consider compelling reasons like this. I think that was the biggest concern of the committee, not that these would be the mandatory, but as much as these were compelling, please consider these and we'll provide the justification.
Yeah, if we look at the document that was circulated coming out of the subcommittee, I think my concern is with the wording that says the committee recommends that the coordinating board adopt predefined justifications, which seems to be leaning toward automatic approval. And it seems like it would be better to say something like the coordinating board recognize following justifications as possible, or that there are justifications that could be possible, and here's some possibilities. I don't know. I don't know the wording, but it's different from adopt predefined.
That's better language.
It's a lot more inclusive and allows more for other options for the colleges if they have some other kind of justification that would fit in there instead of saying predefined justification. That the subcommittee recommends that the coordinating board adopt all of the following, but not limited to the justifications below for academic reasons for exceeding the 60-hour limit, and then suggested justifications include but are not limited to, and then list those, and then it's not a predefined, it's a little bit broader in the language.
And I think what they've been saying is instead of using the word adopt, say consider these.
Yeah.
And I think that does get back to what Fred was saying, is that we really are going to do the curriculum inquiry necessary to try to get the degrees to 60 credits. So there's no assumption that just because it's one of those fields automatically it would be approved. So I agree, and I think that gets also to what Dr. Abram was saying.
Yeah, the last point, the other compelling that already covers in that this notion of there could be additional considerations. So I mean that wording's already in there.
One thing I'm wondering though is, isn't the idea that is that we'd want the colleges to have to meet one of these standards at least in order to be considered? It's sort of like having standing. It doesn't mean that the board would automatically accept them, but it means that they've met the minimum threshold to be considered. And as such, I think we might want these to be, codified as eligibility standards for being considered as an exception, and not just loose recommendations.
Well, the problem is the last one is a wild card.
Right.
So it sort of eliminates.
Can we tease that one out and have separate language for that? Because I would want to communicate to the colleges that they have a very good case to bring before the board if they meet one of these standards at least, so that reduces some of their anxiety. It doesn't mean it's automatic. It means that you will have a fair hearing, basically. The board will seriously consider you. And for the other category, maybe set up a different standard or something.
So what if the language there were changed to read that the coordinating board consider justifications of compelling academic reasons? So there's some strikeouts there. And then suggested justifications include the list. Is that going in the direction you're thinking, Dennis?
I think it does.
Can you state that again, please?
So I would strike out, I would replace adopt with consider,
okay.
Strike out predefined, and strike out to facilitate documentation. So it would read, the subcommittee recommends that the coordinating board consider justifications of compelling academic reasons for exceeding the 60-hour limit.
Larry, may we accept that as a friendly amendment to the motion?
Yes. Well, that's up to the maker of the motion, not me. I'm willing to propose it in that sense. Okay.
I approve. For whatever that is.
You have the authority.
I have authority here.
We are really skirting on my edge of Robert's rules here. Further discussion on the refined language regarding justifications.
I would just add one comment. I'm so pleased to see the compelling academic reasons in there, in that preface part, because so much of what we're looking at in terms of licensure and accreditation, those rules are there because those bodies who have looked and studied those areas for many, many years have concluded that these are the requirements that are necessary in order to produce students who are capable and competent in those areas. So it's not just because we have to do this because our licensing requirements require it. There's a predicate to that, which is the licensing boards require it because it is thought to be a compelling academic reason that those students have that training or preparation. And I think that's included in that when we're talking about compelling academic reasons.
Further comments or discussion on the motion? All in favor of this recommendation? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So let's go back to the other side of the page and talk a little bit more about what we might suggest as a recommendation regarding degree fields where there are many requests.
I think this is the area where we were talking earlier that we would like to have a little bit, just a little bit of leeway. And I preface that by saying that I believe all of us here and all the institutions that are represented, we're all very good stewards of the state's money. And I know that our reimbursements are what they are right now, and I understand that. But I also know that we try to do the most that we can with what we have and what we're given. And we don't want the students having to pay for extra courses if they don't need to. However, in building these programs, especially these technical programs and some of the academic programs, we need to have just a little bit of leeway, even if it's 59 to 63. That would give us some sort of leeway to allow for some of those programs to come within, to get close, and then that would help them also not have to ask for the justification. If they're going to exceed it by, 63, then they would be able to apply for that.
Just as a point of information, I don't think SACS will allow you to go to 59.
No.
Well, 60 to 63.
Right.
You're right. SACS won't let you go 59, so is there anybody else we need to please here? But thanks
legislature.
The legislature
said 60. Well, actually, they said the minimum that SACS requires, which is 60. And so I think in order to comply with the law, I think we have to
have 60, so
Yeah,
60 to 63.
Well, I don't know that we can say, 60 to 63 until it goes through an approval process, because the legislature, the way it's worded, is the minimum allowed by SACS, and that's 60. So I don't think we could say 60 to 63 without them, and that's what the approval process is for. And I understand what you're saying, that would help schools not send so many, but I don't think we can because of the way the law was written.
That's correct.
So maybe another aspect of this would be to ask whether what you're saying is, would the board have some different level of standard or scrutiny for proposals that were asking for more than 63 or less than 63? I don't know. Is that sort of where you're going? It sounds like
We need some. We can't go under 60.
Right.
Because then SACS won't approve it. So it has to be at 60 or above, and we don't want to go too high over. That gives you one other course that you can put your chemistry back in there, or you can put one other course back in there that really supports your core for that program. That's critical for that program.
I guess, Ronald, has there been any discussion about how the review process will be handled here within the coordinating board? Are you going to be looking at how far a program is away from the 60 credit hours? Is there any type of rubric that's going to be used for that?
There is no rubric as far as I know so far. what people have been discussing and looked at is what was sent out together with a memorandum, and that is a basic background information how institutions are dealing with it so far. So looking at the spread, but Dr. Peebles may want to say something.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. First of all, the SAC standard actually says that an institution must have at least one degree program of 60 hours. I was asked about this a couple of weeks ago, so I went back and read it. And it's kind of interesting because the SAC standard actually says that in order to be accredited, a college that offers the associate degree must have at least one program of 60 hours. Now, by custom and practice, that's always been translated to then all of them have to be at least 60 hours. And so I don't know that we want to try to, I don't know which college wants to test that theory in their next reaccreditation to see what their visiting committee has to say about that. But it is interesting if you go back and look at the standard, and it says the same thing about the 120-hour rule. It says that you must have at least one degree program of a minimum of 120 hours. And so the implication is that as long as you got one at 60, the rest of them can be at whatever. But again, I don't know how many of you want to tackle that one with SACs. I certainly wouldn't recommend it. And I can tell you that as a reviewer for SACs, I always adopted it's got to be at least 60 or 120 hours. Okay. But I want to speak a little bit to Colleen's point about, in some of your inquiry about programs where we get a lot, say we get a lot of requests from HVAC. And one of the things that we have discussed internally is that notion of if it turns out that there are a lot of colleges out there who say we need to have, and they have some compelling academic reasons for it and justification for it, that it needs to be at least, say, 66 hours or whatever, that would be something to consider, and that can be dealt with through field study or some kind of a compact type thing. And so that has been discussed internally about how to look at that. Now, beyond that, we haven't really developed any sort of process yet, although we've had a couple of meetings about it, about how exactly we're going to handle this beyond sending out the memo and asking institutions to look. The other thing to keep in mind is that I looked at a printout of every associate of applied science degree in the state of Texas from every institution. And the interesting thing about it is I think that in every single field, there's an institution that's at 60, there's an institution at 72, and there's a bunch of them in between. And so now the interesting part, or question to me would be, what effect does that then have on licensure, for example? And I don't know that anybody, it might be interesting to get some information from the Board of Nursing, for example, about ADN programs and how do schools that have a 72-hour program, do they actually have a higher pass rate than those schools that have a 60-hour program? And there's about a dozen or so in the state of Texas that either already have a 60-hour program or have every intention of going there. So there's a lot of interesting questions that come up about this, and it's also obvious to me, too, that a lot of institutions out there are doing what you've all suggested that they're doing, and that is that you're really looking at it hard and trying to figure out, can you get to 60 hours and that kind of thing. And the other comment I would have to make about the question about the range in courses is that ultimately the answer to dealing with those issues about having 3-hour and 4-hour courses and with the various and sundry combinations of lecture and lab you can have for contact hours and so forth. The ultimate answer to that may not be to allow a spate of degrees that are at 61 or 62 hours. The answer to that may actually lie in cleaning up Ueac or the ACGM. So there's actually two ways to skin that cat, so to speak, that we might want to look at. So.
I guess that That's the thought process that I would like for us and the co-board and the colleges to think about is as these patterns come up, what is the mechanism by which they can be addressed or questioned? Because I think that's an excellent question. Why do some HVAC programs have 60 when some have 72? Would that be a statewide kind of thing like we do with math and with English and with social science that we could perhaps look at and develop mechanisms for that on the AAS side through the GIPWE or the WECM?
Let me toss out an idea. It sounds like really we'll know more when we have data. Yeah. And at this point, we just don't have that yet. And so would an appropriate recommendation be that the board provide summary statistics about the number of requests that come in by discipline so that if there are patterns that establish that perhaps this group can be privy to that information and conduct further discussions about whether or not it might be appropriate to address course hour packaging in the ACGM or the WECM, or whether there might be a need to try to gather together representatives from certain fields or disciplines to discuss some sort of, I'm forgetting the term, but just kind of something that stands for that particular field.
Yes.
Shall we have that? Did you get enough of that to make that into a motion? Whoever is taking notes. And so I would entertain a motion to request that the coordinating board maintain data regarding requests for justification by discipline, to share that with the Ueac when it is available, for further discussion about actions that may be needed to try to accommodate the two-year schools or the schools that are affected.
I'd like to make the motion, and I would like to add to it as well to really watch and provide information for all of us on those areas. There's a nursing consortium right now, and Collin College is a part of that, really redefining their whole curriculum to the 60-hour. And our nursing program has been very successful with pass rates and everything in the past. So what I'm certainly interested to see is, so how will it compare now compared to how we've done in the past? And if that information from that consortium, I'm not sure how many colleges are a part of that, could be shared statewide too, I think that'd be very helpful.
That's a good suggestion, yes. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Thank you. Do we need further discussion about the subcommittee recommendations on the 60 credit hour limit?
So I'd like to address the last sentence. That's the sentence that precedes or leads into the list of specific fields we were just talking about. And again, I guess I would say that I think that it could be misinterpreted to mean that where the committee is recommending that there be blanket exemptions or phased implementation given there. And if we replace the word consider with give special attention to requests for, it would perhaps be clearer the intention.
Maybe we add to that the idea of considering consortium compacts or something, that those would be the areas
and I think
where we look at that.
This is right in belongs connected to the request for information for these fields. You know. I just think the way it's written there, the intent was not that they'd be considered giving exemptions or giving blanket phased implementation, but it could be interpreted to mean that, and that would mean it would just be thrown out. So let's not say that.
Any other suggestions? Yes, Barbara.
Just a question on the
first sentence on the back side, for those programs that do not have a compelling justification, some of those strategies I think would be helpful for those that do or do not have compelling academic reasons.
Can we just strike the first part of that
I mean,
sentence?
for example, the facilitating information sharing, facilitate collaborations. I think any support that would come from the coordinating board would be welcome in that regard.
Okay.
Good suggestion.
What did you want to strike? I didn't catch it.
Basically, the first part of the first sentence on the second page, strike the first half of that sentence up to the comma. I think would capture that pretty well.
Yep.
Anything else before I shift gears and move us forward? Okay. Well, the second topic discussed at our February meeting was just strategies for building basic skills into degree programs, especially in ways that may not consume large quantities of credit hours. And again, this was a strategy to try to meet, educational mandates, state mandates for providing supplemental instruction, remedial instruction in ways that might not require students to take a large number of excess hours. I'll give you, again, a couple minutes to take a quick look at this, and then we'll open discussions to see whether there are ideas of any formal recommendations that we might want to come out of the committee. Are there some suggestions about what we might do with this list? Are there comments, suggested changes to the document as it currently stands?
I want to make sure I understand how it's constructed. The first half of the document focuses on learning framework. The second one on co-requisite remediation, that's referring to math and English skills, right?
Yes.
So I have an issue with the term basic skills then, because the learning framework content is not designed to be basic skills content. It's not remedial content. It's not content that was designed to be taught in a high school setting. It's content that's designed to be taught in a college setting. So if we want to keep them on the same sheet, that's fine, but we should at least change the language from basic skills to something like student success and basic skills, or student success and developmental remediation, or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember those being part of like a specific, when we were discussing those, like a specific class match, as opposed to various offerings that you could have, which could be possibly in a class, but
everywhere it says basic.
Not that those were all in one of those classes, but you could have like kind of like boot camp scenarios, or something like that before they even enroll, is what I thought those were in.
Well, to be fair, just kind of a background, I think the subcommittee wrestled with what this prompt actually meant. And because we'd done the 60 hours, we got to this point going, okay, so what do they want? And the best we could remember was Commissioner Paredes talking about the success courses. So we said, well, maybe he's talking about the success courses, and let's also address the developmental educational courses. So they may need to be broken out. We were trying to figure out, and this isn't as much strategies as much as some ideas and to share and how this might be dealt with.
Perhaps we could put a definition in this document that would actually kind of follow up with what you said about what do we mean by basic skills. When we say basic skills and we say embedding basic skills, how are we defining that? And that might tease out some of the things that you were talking about a while ago if we just put that right up front.
Right, I thought the basic skills, it's been a while since we last talked about this, but my recollection was when we were talking about basic skills, to me it was like things about, balancing your checkbook, learning how to time manage. All of those are very basic skills that you want young adults and college students and really anybody to have. And sometimes they come into the educational setting and they lack those. And so I think what we've done is we ended up listing them sometimes, and other times we just clumped them together under basic skills, if I remember correctly. So, when we say basic skills, we're talking about the study skills, time management, financial management, communication skills, social responsibility, personal responsibility, critical thinking. Those were basic skills that we wanted the students to have, and those are the skills that it was my understanding that would have been embedded into other courses that are in the core or in courses, so that the student didn't have to use up another 1 or 2 or 3 credit hour, plus they wouldn't have to pay. That would be one more course that they didn't have to pay for or borrow money for. Granted, it would be transferable, but it wouldn't be towards a degree. And here again, if you're using that 60-hour cutoff, if it's a mandatory course, then they've just used up 3 credit hours that they can't use in their. And don't get me wrong, this is going to help them. This is going to make them a much stronger student. But we didn't want them having to use up their precious technology or their programmatic credit hours with that.
So you're saying it's those skills which are not necessarily the academic skills, which the core, for example, addresses. It's those skills which prepare the students to be ready for the core skills. And Melinda pointed out that there's another word used, it's success skills, which may be more suitable than basic skill, because it's the skills which makes you successful with academic.
And I think we were using those interchangeably, David. Don't you think that's what we were doing?
I kind of like that. I kind of like being able to separate that out a little bit, and maybe finding a different word for that.
That would help. Maybe if we just refer to them as success skills, and then everywhere you see the term basic skills, we would put in success skills, and that way it would be a differentiation, and we would just define it up at the top, saying that the incorporation of success skills, in parentheses, time management, financial management, communication, social responsibility, critical thinking, personal responsibility. Those are what we're talking about, not the basic reading and writing, because that is a different animal altogether, and that's not what we were addressing.
Well, isn't the basic reading and writing like in that second part where it has talks about the rapid reviews and the boot camps and so forth? So like the first half is like the how to be a successful student, life skills, how to know that you have enough money to pay for your books and buy food, that sort of thing, life skills or basic success skills. But the second part was like more academic. I need some more help with my reading, or I need some more help with my math, and how we're going to.
But that part of that is time management. And also critical thinking skills for them to look at themselves and say, I need help with this, and then how are they going to go get help and where they're going to get help for.
I was just saying, I think that's the two areas, is that top part where it talks about the first year experiences are not, I mean, I think there's, like you said, two different fields that we're going. One section of it, the second section, is mostly talking about, to me, the way I remember it when we were there, it was mostly talking about subject-specific education things that you're lacking. For instance, with basic math, possibly, or going off the table in a year, how are we going to get the people who don't know how to do fractions up to speed? That would be kind of like in that second listing,
Right.
down at the bottom page. But that's the way I understood it. And that, and so when we get, I don't know, are we on the second list as well? Because the only comment I had is that it says co-requisite remediation, and some of those things we were discussing were things you do before.
Well, some of them are, but like you're trying to teach somebody to balance their checkbook. If you show them, but then if they can't add and subtract, then you've got to go back and address that issue, because so many of these things are, you can't do one without the other. If they can't read the problem, then they're not going to be able to solve it. If they're not going to be able to read the directions, then how are you going to help them with success skills if they can't read? So to me, it was a combination of both, but what we were really looking at were the success skills, and the others to me were like an offshoot. If you found you had a problem with their basic reading, writing, math skills, then you had to do something about it in that environment or content.
I think it's something that would help a lot is on that first year experience, if we just change that whole title, because learning frameworks complicates it. That confuses it, because learning frameworks is a lot more than just college success skills. I think if you take that out, and really what we're talking about is that first part of the college success skills, and the second part you can talk about the remedial or developmental educational pedagogical practices or something like that. That's really how I think those are two separated, and that might get address what you're talking about.
And to piggyback on that, I think there are a couple of assumptions, particularly in that first paragraph, I think that are misleading. Number one, if we're looking at first-year experience, they are transferable hours if they are in core. So the preface to reduce number of non-transferable hours, I think, sends us off in the wrong direction. Number two, I think every institution has the prerogative to include or not include a first-year experience in their core, if they so choose. So there's nothing that suggests to an institution that they have to include a first-year experience if they do not want one. So I think those two pieces may be what's throwing us off here. Well, I think it's also reflective of the idea that committees should not work after 4 o'clock.
Agreed.
You can see we don't recall what we said.
There are two things. One is, what was the charge that formed this subcommittee? I'm curious, because it does seem like there are 3 or 4 major strands that are trying to vie their way through this. The other thing is a reminder that the developmental education is under a complete refit in the state of Texas, and already this idea of non-course based options and eliminating lowest levels of math and reading is already underway and doesn't necessarily require any input from this body until perhaps we get results, and then there would be for us to review. So I guess, does anybody remember the charge? Do we have a reading of the charge that created the subcommittee?
Well, the reason I remember was that a lot of people there were comments about, we've created another course. And the intent of Dr. Paredes was not to have created another course, but to have embedded some of these success skills into already existing courses. Okay. That was the charge that I remember that you brought forward.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's the embedding part, and that's the. That's where the confusion may come from, that the learning frameworks course is listed there. If it's the embedding portion of it, if the basic skills, quote unquote, make up the learning framework, it wouldn't fit anymore, the core. And that's why some of them were denied, because that's where they were. And
that's something that I believe I was part of the conversation when the commissioner was here and talking about our usual modus operandi is to, if there's learning that needs to be done, we put a course. Mm-hmm. And then that's how we end up with, what we end up with. And so the directive was to understand how is it that each individual course that we choose to put in the degree plan work with and reinforce life skills, things that they're going to do in actual application. So not abstract math for math's sake, but math as it relates to project-based learning or problem-based learning, real-life experiences. So I'm not sure then how this becomes a recommendation from this group to, network through your curriculum life skills and then provide a curriculum map of that. Right now, the core curriculum has kind of got our time with that one, trying to figure out how all these 6 competencies are going to web through our core right now. I don't know where we are with trying to figure out how do we have financial literacy embedded throughout the curriculum. How do we have, don't make any stupid decisions curriculum,
It's all about that.
From my experience, for the 4 years that I've been in college, and mainly more than anything working with the Career Center, we've taught a lot of students in how to develop skills. And talking about skills, we usually categorize them into 3 main sections, which are our adaptive skills, pretty much how to be flexible, patience, time management, and then we have the job-related, and the last one is our skills are transferable, meaning anything that you learn from experience right now, you can still implement it wherever else you go. But one of the most interesting things that I've learned is that we actually conduct a workshop called Excel, and we're trying to teach a student how to not only go to school and do well, but we also want you to become a candidate that excels. And Excel actually is an acronym, and it stands for Education, Experience, Community, Eye to the Future, and Leadership, where we teach them about how can they get high grades, make sure you're involved in school, make sure that you're really in touch with your professors, where you get the information that you need, experiences, where can you go and get experiences from volunteering, study abroad, you have your work, your organizations, your community service. Of course, we want you to go out and be part of the community, not only on campus. Eye to the Future, where we want them to start visualizing where do they want to go, what do they want to do in the future. And leadership, of course, we want them to be involved and be well-rounded by other people. So one of the things that we've talked about also is the implementation of learning outcomes. So every time that we do any kind of event, and this is expanding more throughout campus, we have to put in first, what are the learning outcomes of our activities? What do we want our students to learn, to get out of these activities that we have? And then at the end of the activity, we actually have evaluations to ensure that the students have learned what we said that we would be teaching. So implementing that in our presentations and student-wide activities, this can also be implemented to the classes or university classes. I don't know if that's the same course for every university, but this is pretty much where they teach you about school, what are the activities, what are the different resources, and this is probably one of the courses that can teach more about the skills that we're trying to implement through other courses.
I may sound blasphemous, but I'm not sure if this really adds anything to the discussion. We were answering a prompt, and Reinhold, I'll look at you and say, did we answer the prompt? But I don't know if it really adds to our discussion or contributions as a Ueac, because as everybody has said, we're different phases of doing this anyway. I don't know if we're really adding anything to the discussion.
It's a question that's been floating in my head as I listen to a lot of the discussion. It's like, okay, so we've got this document. Are we going to do anything with it? If so, what?
I had thought at the time, and still kind of think that, even though now I'm kind of wondering, why I don't remember exactly. But I know that at least on the second part, and I think on the first, I thought we were basically making like a resource list. So you're trying to figure out how to do some of these things these are all the things that we were doing in the room. You know, we all were kicking around ideas. Well, I do this and we do that and we do this and this would be nice and you should do this and you should offer this if people can't. You know, so the first half we were kicking around ideas about what kind of life skills or success skills there were, and the second half was what is everybody basically doing to get through developmental whatever faster. And I took it to be we were just basically not so much making a recommendation as opposed to, you know, if you're sitting out in the middle of nowhere and you can't get to any conferences or anything and you're trying to figure out how to deal with these situations, here are some possibilities that other people are doing.
So does this have value as a resource document that could perhaps be posted on the coordinating board's website somewhere?
I think it might. I mean, in a sense, the commissioner came to this group and asked us to consider it, and he deserves a response. So I think having a statement like the opening statement here, requesting that the board facilitate or support strategies for embedding skills into the regular curriculum rather than having students register for extra hours that don't count for anything to do that is a good thing. I think the organization of the list needs to be re-examined. Most of the bullets on the first set really could apply to any courses, not just tied to the first year experience course or the learning frameworks course. Some of them really are co-requisite, not embedded in courses, and so there's probably some organization that needs there. And having suggestions that institutions should look at ways to embed skills into courses is a good thing, I think.
So let's try this. Are there one or two people that would be willing to take this document and clean it up a little bit so that it would be ready for posting on the website?
I would be willing to work on it. But this is what I'd want to do. So you all can decide whether you'd want me to do it or not. I would actually want to take out the reference to the Learning Framework course because the academic content of that course really can't be embedded in other courses. That's why it's a course. But what I would consider kind of the floor of what you need to be academically successful, that absolutely should be embedded across the board. And our successful first-year instructors across all areas of curriculum, our really good ones already do it, right? They say, here's this test coming up. Here is this order in which you should prepare, because if you wait till the night before, you're not going to do well. That's embedding time management skills into the course. So I would want to remove the reference to that course and instead focus on how we could help facilitate universities and colleges to work with those faculty who may not know how to do that, to embed it into across the first year curriculum, well, and beyond, of course.
I want to second what you're saying because I think there's some confusion here, and I think there was even when Dr. Paredes made that comment. There's confusion between what the first year experience was and what the first year experience now can be with the development of the Learning Frameworks course. Because I agree, the Learning Frameworks, and I've come out of education, Learning Frameworks has a solid research base that actually talks about how students learn, why students learn, how to facilitate learning. And many of these courses do incorporate some of these other basic skills because you're not going to learn if you can't manage your time or if you don't open the book or you haven't bought the book. So there are elements of that, I think, that are incorporated into Learning Frameworks. But I would it doesn't behoove me to disagree with the commissioner. However, I do think that there is intrinsic value in a Learning Frameworks course that is properly constructed and is part of the core curriculum that does differentiate it from basic skills.
Point of discussion that doesn't contradict anything that you're saying is it might be time now for the state of Texas through the coordinating board to look at what is a Texas University College first year experience about. The research says that you got 10 days. You got 10 days to capture them or they're going to leave. I know in the community college world that's a big thing for us. So what are we doing in our first year students? Which classes are our students taking predominantly in the first year? Who's on the front line? And what do those courses do to support that first year experience so that there's a combination of the life skills and the strengthening skills and the success skills. Maybe there's some opportunities for professional development in terms of brain science and how we learn throughout that cadre of the first year experience. And we think of it then as a kind of a subset of who are the professionals on the front line in the first year, what's the curriculum that typically gets taught in the first year, what are the student services that particularly get used in the first year, and developing that real strong coordination, which would work with the Bridging the Gaps initiative, with the developmental education transition and bridging. There are all kinds of initiatives that are tied to that idea of what we do in the first year makes all the difference.
Actually, we're going to be talking in just a few minutes about future discussion items, and so I think I have added that to the list of possibilities. Barbara, could I ask you perhaps to work with Kristen in cleaning up you spoke, that's always the danger, to work on cleaning up this document? And do we need a motion to simply ask the staff to post this on the website somewhere? No.
I think so.
Could we perhaps get a 2-year partner person?
Oh, that would be good. Is there somebody from a 2-year program institution that would be willing to assist? Ann? Great.
May I suggest that we wait till they get it done to then...
Okay.
To decide whether you want to...
Shall we hope to have an eye to review this at our next meeting, probably to come in the fall? Gives you a nice lead time to try to chew on that for a while. Okay, very good. Any more discussion? So somewhere I have my agenda. We are now at the point of discussing possible future agenda items and our next meeting date. A couple of things that I have heard through the course of the day, either through our conversations as a group or conversations that I've had with people individually, trying to define what a first-year experience is. A dual coding of courses in foundational component areas and the component area option. How much do we want to do that? Do we want to see if it's possible to just give everything that's in a foundation component area a component area option designation, and what the value and the costs of that would be? Another topic that has come up is automation and recruitment of student participation in reverse transfer agreements, and some ideas or best practices that we might be able to recommend in regards to that. And so, thoughts on those ideas or other ideas that you might have?
What does the coordinating board need in the near term for us to look at?
Yeah, we actually had an idea, and maybe it's time for Alan to come up and talk about. You can come up here so they see you.
Didn't expect to be front and centered. I thought I could hide in the back. Hi, I'm Alan Mickey here with the coordinating board. And just as Reinhold works with Ueac, I'm the coordinating board coordinator for GEAC, which is the Graduate Education Advisory Committee. Actually, Academic Affairs here at the coordinating board has got several advisory committees. Ueac's one of them, but we've got a couple more. There's GEAC, and there's also the Learning Technology Advisory Committee. And the idea has come up, expressed by the leadership of GEAC and LTAC, that perhaps it would be a good idea, both for the committees and for the coordinating board, to have the committees meet jointly, or to have some of the committee members do something in cooperation with the other committees, because there are a lot of things where there are overlap in the concerns between undergraduate education, graduate education, and learning technology. So what I wanted to do is just float an idea by you, to get a reaction from you, to see if parts of this committee would be interested in meeting in a kind of summit, a kind of workshop, a kind of conference, with other selected members from Ueac and from LTAC to discuss some common issues. As Reinhold and I have talked about it, we don't think it's necessarily a good idea to have all of the committees meet together. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is because not everybody here has a point of contact, particularly with graduate education. Those of you who represent two-year institutions don't really have a whole lot of overlapping issues with graduate education. Another reason is just a practical one, where if we have less than half of the members come, then it's not a quorum, and therefore not an official meeting of Ueac. Doesn't have to be posted to the state register, doesn't have to be broadcast on the web and all that. So we were thinking perhaps those of you from four-year institutions or those of you with a particular commitment and interest to learning technologies might be interested in joining us for this powwow. How we imagined it working would be a separate meeting, perhaps sometime in the summer, perhaps in July, where we could meet to have a few presentations, to have some speakers, and then, more importantly, break out into some smaller groups where members of Ueac and Ueac and LTAC could all meet together and discuss some solutions and discuss some kinds of problems. You may have some agenda items and things that you would like LTAC to be considering from the perspective of undergraduate education, similarly for Ueac. Just to throw out some ideas of the kinds of topics that could be discussed, and here I'm limiting myself to just those issues that intersect with all three groups, Ueac, Ueac, and learning technology, would be things like the pros and cons of MOOCs and large classes, and other delivery methods. The implications, for example, of learning technology for the content and rigor of programs. Learning technology and advising. Learning technology and how it can be used for independent studies or capstone or thesis projects. Learning technology and implications for teaching assistants and discussion sections of large classes. Learning technology in lab sections. Learning technology in developmental education. Opportunities that learning technology provides for alternatives for traditional papers, research projects, theses. Ideas like what learning technology can do to build community through cohorts or learning communities. Those are the kinds of things we have in mind. So if you're interested in pursuing something like this, I'd be curious to hear you brainstorm about what other kinds of topics can be considered and any ideas for the format and structure or feasibility of a meeting like this that I can pass along to the leadership of Ueac and LTAC.
Let's do a quick show of hands on who here might be interested in participating in this type of discussion.
I wonder whether a similar rationale could be made for building something that might bridge, that would leave Ueac out, but would bridge learning technology, undergraduate, and developmental ed, because the developmental ed advisory committee would be interested in learning technology in developmental ed, and that would affect both two-year and four-year institutions.
Good idea.
Also, technology and advising in really helping students be successful in completing their core and then undergraduate and graduate.
Other ideas for particular topics that might be addressed by a joint advisory committee gathering?
Advising, I think, is the biggest link, if you were to include all of those, which probably falls under the subheading of transitions. You know, transitioning from one college to university, transitioning from lower division to upper division, selecting your major, transitions from undergraduate to graduate. All of those require good expertise in advising.
Just retention issues too, and how technology could support or impede efforts.
That's a good idea, retention.
You know, with budget issues, there are institutions that are considering the necessity perhaps of closing small enrollment programs, but technology might offer ways for consortia across institutions to sustain programs so that there were better access around the state.
When you say learning technologies, the whole implications of social media within learning technologies themselves, are you including that, or would that be a separate topic?
No reason it couldn't be included. Sure. Okay, well, thank you very much. I guess the next step, if you are interested, would be to work with the leadership of Ueac to have a conference call meeting with the leadership of LTAC and GEAC to discuss some ideas, sketch out some agendas. And if you have any ideas that you would like to pass on, I'd certainly be interested in hearing them. You could email them to me directly, Alan Mickey, or to Reinhold, and Reinhold will make sure that I get it. And look forward to seeing you this summer then. Thanks.
Well, I think we still need to identify a few things that we might want to be chatting about during our next meeting, which probably will occur during the fall. I'm going to echo Fred's question back at Reinhold again. Were there any things in particular that you wanted the Ueac to address from the coordinating board's perspective?
No, we did not have any specific point lined out. Mm-hmm.
I have, I think, an echo in my head that at the time in the last several years when we were working on thinking about core curriculum issues, there was a division made among possible changes as to what was allowable within current legislation and what might involve legislation to change rules. And so I'm thinking particularly about maybe the 42-hour number. Is that something that it's time to start thinking about now that we have done our best on what we can do within the law? Whether should we be thinking about recommendations that might be contingent on legislative changes? I don't know who I'm asking. But I do remember that was sort of set aside. We won't think about that now, and then that mean we won't think about that ever? I don't know.
Well, the timing of the fall would be right because the next legislative session will come in the following spring. It might be good for that if somebody, if you or somebody else has something in mind to make it fairly concrete prior to the meeting, so that the committee has a very concrete idea of what to discuss and debate or strategize about. And so if you or somebody has an idea like that you work on it and get in touch with me well in advance so that we can put forward something or even distribute or think about prior to the meeting.
One topic, and I don't know if it would be pervasive enough for us all to consider, but one of the other moving pieces that we've been dealing with, of course, is the impact of House Bill 5 on K-12 education and the movement to the foundation programs and how that might be affecting college readiness as students are moving into our programs. The effects or the outcome of the new TSIA, Texas Success Initiative assessment, and how that's impacting our programs. I'm not thinking of it so much as a policy decision as much as an information sharing in terms of whatever reports or data collection that we can utilize and try to interpret as a group.
I remember hearing some rumblings too on campus about junior colleges moving towards offering 4-year degrees. And I don't know if that was just a nightmare or a rumor or somebody's imagination or what, but that would be something to weigh in on, I think, to sort out.
Any other suggested topics? I have got currently a list of 7 based on our discussions here today, and I thought perhaps what I would do is forward these to Reinhold and Melinda, and we'll let them kind of pick the ones that are of greatest need to the coordinating board, and we'll go forward from there. Let's talk a little bit about the general time frame for the next Ueac meeting. It is my understanding that this group has not met as a whole through the summer. Is that correct?
No, last year did.
And the subcommittee was.
What is the question? If
do we need to think about meeting over the summer, or shall we look at fall?
Well, the idea was, I think last year you met in the summer, but it was after the legislative session, and so you wanted to discuss what came out of it. So it makes sense to do that. And the idea is with Alan's proposed summit, that you may not want to have another full meeting, but some of you will be involved with that, and then go with the next full meeting in November to prepare for the legislative session. So that was the thinking, that you may not need a summer meeting. But that's up to you.
Is there anybody who really wants to make a big push for a meeting in the summer? I knew if I asked that the right way, I'd get an answer.
No.
So I think the question is there a particular month that is a better candidate for a meeting than others?
Late September, October.
Late September, October? Get us past the start of the academic year and into kind of further into the semester?
Yes.
Nobody's looking like they're completely vexed by this idea.
Is there any sense that we should be meeting, instead of meeting in relationship to when the board meets? Like, should we meet before or after?
Reinhold, Melinda, thoughts on that?
Well, the board meets in October, but anything which has to go to the October board has to really be dealt with 2 months prior. So you really would have to meet in the summer for something for the October board. And then it meets again in January, and that if something important would come forward for that, there would be time for that because the cause meeting is in December. So everything has to be done by prior to November. But if it is a recommendation in terms of legislative statutes, that would be not going to the board really anyway, because it would be a recommendation to board leadership what to discuss with legislative partners.
So maybe October is a time that we could get things ready to go if the board were going to consider in January?
Yes, yes.
October 3rd is the first Friday of October, and that gets us away from the hustle and bustle of fall starting, and it's pretty early in October. So if there was something that we wanted to address from the previous meeting from the board, we'd have time and then to get it to them for December.
Why don't we, would y'all be willing to do a doodle poll or something on the first few Fridays, maybe the last Friday in September and the first couple of Fridays in October, and that would allow us to get more firm information about availability of the Ueac membership, including those people who aren't here right now, and we can go about scheduling in that time frame?
Sounds good.
Are there other items of business?
Yes, so there's one. It's a more an informational update, but I will slip it into this agenda item as things to think about. James wanted to give you a little bit update about the ACGM meeting, and you can come up here.
You don't like your seat, do you?
No, they should see you. Come up here.
Hello. I wanted to give you a notification of the work that the ACGM Advisory Committee did this week. The staff advisory person for that committee is Rebecca Leslie, and she's worked closely with the folks in data collection to build up a picture of ACGM course frequency of usage. And in the past, we've of course done maintenance of the manual, but typically what we do is we look at problem areas. We haven't looked at this in a while. We need to look at this, accounting, or we need to look at biology, or look at things piece by piece. This is the first time in a long time that we've had enough time and breathing room to really look at the manual as a whole. And we discovered something interesting that I didn't realize was going on. In the past, I'd asked for frequencies of course usage by different areas. And what I didn't realize was something kind of important. If a course hasn't been used at all, it didn't show up in the reports I got. So I had no idea how many courses there were in the ACGM, and there were a lot that were not used at all and had not been used in years, which accounted for why we still have COBOL and Pascal languages in the manual and other things. And you guys talked earlier about those 3 and 4 credit hour versions of various courses. There's a bunch of them where the 3 credit hour version is used widely and the 4 credit hour version isn't used at all, or it's only used at 1 institution or 2 institutions. So we asked the ACGM Advisory Committee to look at this, and they looked at it really carefully. Rebecca drew up some wonderful color-coded spreadsheets, with stuff in red wasn't used at all, had 0 enrollments. Things in yellow had 1 or 2, and so forth. And she did it for a 3-year window. So we weren't just looking at any single year. We were looking at a 3-year window for the 3 most recent years that we had data. And she sent out this document to the committee in advance, so they had a few weeks to study it. And then when the committee met, they broke up into 3 broad discipline groups. One that was mostly the natural and physical sciences, and one that was more humanities and behavioral and social sciences, and another one that was the arts and kinesiology and some other things. And we asked them basically to make recommendations, and they tackled basically everything at once, and there were 2 groups that they broke it out into. And the first group was all the things that they recommended for deletion. And that mostly included the things that weren't used at all by anyone. So I hope that those deletions will be uncontroversial, because I think we would all agree if no one's using it, there's no reason to keep it there. But also in that group would be some things that are underutilized, that are only used by 1 or 2 institutions, and even there not with high enrollments, just with relatively low enrollments. Then they had another group that was stuff that you could also say was underutilized, but was in more of a kind of a gray area, that maybe 2, 3, or 4 institutions used it with low to moderate enrollments. And those are not recommended for deletion, but they are recommended for further study. So probably at the next ACGM meeting, which may occur this summer or will be this fall, they're going to try and dig further into that and tackle some of those courses, so you might see additional recommendations for deletions to come out. And the reason I want to draw this to your attention, again, is because it concerns the whole manual, concerns a whole wide array of disciplines, and it's a big chunk of courses. So we don't want anyone to be taken by surprise when these courses are deleted. The regular process, which we're going to follow here, is that when the committee recommends courses for deletion, we mark them that way in the manual. And they don't actually go away for 2 years. So the first year is when we expect you folks at the institutions to look in the manual and see, oh, look, here's what's going to be deleted. And if you have strong objections to a deletion, if you feel that there's a good argument for keeping a particular course or a set of courses in the manual, then we want you to bring that forward to us. And Rebecca Leslie, being the staff person in charge of the manual, is the correct person to communicate with about that through email or by phone. She's happy to talk to you about it. And then in the second year after it's been recommended for deletion, that's when it'll actually go out of the manual, and then you can no longer teach it for funding. So the vote was taken now, and there'll probably, as I said, be some more work on this done in the next meeting or so. And so you won't actually see this appear in the manual because we only revise it once a year. So where you will see the deletions actually in the manual, that'll be in January of 2015. But if some of you, say, particularly want to see that list, once Rebecca has the meeting minutes written up and she's drawn the list up in a nice and neat form, I'm sure she'll be happy to share that with you. So we could very easily share that with, and be happy to, because again, I don't want this to be a surprise to anyone. I want you to see what we're doing, because we're doing it, with advice of the advisory committee, which is formed of people from 2- and 4-year institutions. And we just think this will be good maintenance. For one thing, studies show that not just for students, but for any human being, if you give them a list of 100 choices to choose from, it almost paralyzes them. They have a hard time making wise choices. If you give them a list of 5 things, they're a lot more likely to do better in picking and choosing correctly. So there's that thing. But there's also the work for staff. It's work for staff to keep reformatting the manual and doing all the things we need to do when there's this basically dead weight in there. Things that are nobody's using, but it's still in there anyway. So I hope this will make it easier on my staff to keep the manual up as well. So that's really the big item I wanted to tell you about. For the future, I wanted to let you know, if you didn't know already, that the committee had in the past come up with some integrated reading and writing developmental courses. And this is based on the work of our P16 division that says that when you integrate this material, students master it better and they master it more quickly. So we have integrated reading and writing developmental courses already in the manual. The change that's going to be coming comes out of rules and coordinating board rules and the TSI operational plan that the agency is developing. And what's likely to happen at this next meeting is that the integrated reading and writing courses will become mandatory for usage at the highest level. In other words, that last reading and writing course that you would take before you move on to your college course, we're probably going to say that has to be integrated. You could still use the separate courses at the lower levels. You could still use the separate courses for English as a second language developmental courses. But you would need to use the integrated courses at the highest level. And of course, you have the option of using it for every level as well. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that too. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Before James leaves, can I ask one clarifying question on 4.28, the coding rule? And I don't know whether this would have been with you or Rex or whomever. Regarding the comment on the transcripts, this is one that has been of difficulty for a long time. The rule still reads, all undergraduate student transcripts should indicate whether a student has completed the core curriculum satisfactorily. We've been asking for a long time that read must. It makes it really difficult from the 4-year institutions to help determine when students are core complete if we don't have that there. So that's just one question. Was there any consideration of making that a must instead of a should? Because the later in the paragraph it does say they must identify according to the new coding, but it does not say that they must indicate core complete. And then my second is just, what is the implementation date of these changes?
Okay. For the first thing, not to answer for Reinhold in particular, but I would say if we're going to look at changing the rule language to get rid of that March 1st core curriculum submission deadline or to alter that in some way, then we might as well go ahead and look at changing the rules to address the transcripting issue as well. I'd like to make all the changes to particular sections at once rather than doing them kind of sequentially. Well, yeah, okay. And the second question, I'm not quite sure if I understand the context of the second question.
I don't remember which was the first. The first was the must and the should.
Yes.
The second is the implementation date of the coding. Just so.
Oh, when that coding has to start taking place. I think I'll let Reinhold address that. He'll be more up on that than I.
We were thinking of bringing the rule changes to the July board meeting. When you have to use it in the transcript, I don't know how that works. We would implement it for the next, since the core works on a yearly basis, it's not implemented for this coming new core and would be for the following core. So, and then when students get a transcript from that core, it would be implemented. So it's I guess, sometime. You know, a student who would get a transcript next year wouldn't have it because it's not part of that core. Is that the question?
I just know that I will be asked by the registrar, when do we have to do this? I was just wondering what the implementation date was. So it hasn't gone to the board, so it will go to the board in
July.
In July at that point.
Yeah, so it would affect the core, which after the approved core, the first core revision. And I think this should, because there's still some flexibility and the capability of institutions what to show with their software on the transcript. And I would hesitate, must indicate whether a student is complete, because you can calculate that. Anybody can see it if you can count to 42. So I don't know if it has to be if you should mandate it, it must be indicated that the student is core complete. I may be wrong, since I'm not an expert really in reading transcripts.
Well, I won't take the time. I'll talk with you afterwards. But
okay.
It is difficult for a receiving institution to determine if a student has met another institution's core requirements, because those core requirements are not always clear either on that institution's website and in the core repository. I believe that was last updated in 2009. So that's really difficult for us to look at. So I'm just thinking in terms of trying to facilitate student transfer. If we know that the student is core complete, it enables us to work that much more quickly. And many institutions do, so it's not really a criticism. It's just that many do not. And if that were a must instead of a should, then that would help us out.
I understand, yes, what you're saying, because you really have to go to the catalog and yes. Well, then it's up to the committee to discuss if they want to have this change and these rules made now, or...
I didn't mean to bring it up for that purpose.
Would you prefer to discuss at this time or to table? Are there any opposed to deferring the must-should question to another date?
You actually can't vote on anything that's not on the agenda already, so...
Okay.
Yeah. So that would go... The agenda item we are doing right now is future agenda items.
So I will add it to our list of future agenda items.
Well, it should be on the agenda. It's better for students. It helps the students.
Are there any other items of business?
I take it serious. I mean, I understand it. So.
Yeah, let me just make one comment about that. And I may be wrong about this, but my recollection is that the statute says they're supposed to indicate whether students are core complete. And so, yeah. No, the statute says should, or the rules say should?
Rules say should,
well,
not must.
Yeah, I think the statute says they're supposed to do that. So we'll check that.
In that case, we'll check the statute, and we will align the rules with the statute as we...
If that is the case. But you also asked about a timeline for the coding part of it. And I think that's a piece that we may need to consult with TACRO or someone about, because offhand, I don't know how difficult it would be to provide the programming for that in whatever systems they may have. I do know that at least at the institutions that I've been at, that whenever you ask the registrar's office to do something different, well, you all know what I'm talking about.
It's okay. It's okay.
And could I add one thing to what I said earlier? Catherine reminded me that there was another vote taken at the AC Gym Advisory Committee, which I think bears on the work of this committee, which was that the AC Gym Advisory Committee had been asked to consider making 3-hour science courses integrated, meaning that that 3 hours would include both the lecture and the lab, particularly for, I think non-majors version?
Yes,
non-majors, right. And I want to let you know that the committee did not approve that recommendation. Based on feedback we received from a variety of institutions, and if I recall correctly, in particular, a fair number of our four-year institutions really did not like that suggestion. They had doubts about the courses, and so did some of the folks in community colleges. We had basically, I think, some people who teach in the sciences say, we're not sure we could really do an adequate job of teaching the course outcomes if we only have 3 hours. So for that reason, since there was not a clear consensus from the field that this was a safe move to make, the committee decided not to approve that. So unfortunately, that's not going to be a tool that you can use to keep to that 60-hour limit.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Any other items of business? Is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor, stand up.
Thank you.
Oh, good.